We are now live.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Santa Rosa City School Board meeting for September 8th, 2021. And Director Ed Sheffield is going to do our territorial land acknowledgement to start us off tonight.
Thank you, Lori. I've only beta tested today's land acknowledgement, so I did a great deal of homework and a lot of help from friends, and I hope to speak truth, power, and justice. The Santa Rosa City School District and our governing body collectively acknowledge that our schools are located on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the first people of this area, Pomo, Coast Miwok, and Wapo, as well as other first people from time immemorial. We live, work, and send our children to school on lands that have historic, current, future, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards. At recent school board meetings, we have respectfully reserved this time at the start of our meetings to appreciate the physical environment where we conduct our day-to-day lives. And moreover, through these land acknowledgements, we affirm our commitment to recouple the lost, the stolen, the suppressed histories, cultures, and experiences that cannot be forgotten. Our acknowledgement calls on us to commit to a continued learning of how to be stewards of the land we inhabit. Yet, in order to fully understand our place within the history of this land, we, as a district, should also commit ourselves to doing more. Over the past few weeks, I've reached out to friends in our local Indigenous communities, representatives from Sonoma County Indian Health, California Indian Museum and Cultural Center, Grayton Rancheria, and Sonoma County Regional Parks. They are supportive of city schools doing land acknowledgements to open our meetings, but they all offer the same suggestions, which I've been encouraged to bring up for the district to go beyond the gesture, to really change ourselves with what we as a district can do to make our school communities stronger by supporting and empowering our Indigenous students, and by also educating our non-Indigenous on how to listen, learn, and step away from neo-colonial privileges and perspectives. Going beyond the gesture could mean that we actively engage with our Indian education program within our district's student and family services. I know that we do engage Indian ed, but perhaps we start there as we seek assistance with action steps and recommendations for the district to adopt. I'd love to have Elizabeth Billy, our Indian ed coordinator, speak with the board sometime, perhaps soon. Additionally, the California Indian Museum, which hosts the Tribal Youth Ambassadors Program, told me that they have been working on curricula for local schools and have even offered to share it with me. Hopefully there's more to come on this. But I would love to see the district engage more in partnerships like these. Actions do speak louder than words. It's a slow and steady process. Our land acknowledgement is an initial step, and I'm very glad that we do this. I'll end by saying, for the past and the present, for the future of our community, with honor and with gratitude, we give respect for the land and the people who have stewarded it. Thank you, Chair Fong, and thank you, Board.
Thank you very much, Director. Let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
For which it stands,
one nation,
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all. Just to start tonight as a community, again, I was reminded about that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's taking completely all of us. I just want to recognize and to just appreciate all the people who are right there in the closest contact with our students, in the classrooms, on the playground, in the hallways, in the offices. Um, you are holding their well-being and engagement in you, in how you treat your children, your students. And we thank you, because whatever we do and say at board meetings barely makes a ripple on the kinds of engagement that you offer to your students every single day, every single minute. How you speak to them, how you support them, how you uplift them, how you treat them, and how you make them happy to go to school, happy to be in school, happy to try hard, happy to be their best selves. So we thank you on behalf of the board. We thank you. We know that this is where the rubber meets the road, where the work, the true work, is getting done, and we thank you. And then backing off that little bit, site administrators, absolutely, you are in the trenches as well. We absolutely know that you are there with many touches on kids, in terms of being there with them and supporting them and knowing them well. And then moving back to our coordinators and our directors. I understand that a lot of you are teaching right now. We really appreciate that. And then, of course, to our cabinet, who, you got that big view and things are coming at you. I keep telling Superintendent Trunell that she is drinking out of a fire hose, and she still remains calm and works hard to get things done. So we appreciate that. I just want to recognize all of that and say that out loud, that we recognize it and appreciate it. Yes. All right. There were no actions taken in closed session to report, and there were no items considered in closed session for action in open session. Do we have any statements of abstention tonight, board members? Seeing none. Board members, do we have any adjustments to the agenda tonight? I am going to pull one of them. It's a contract. So it's F item, oh my gosh, somebody help me out, 5. So F5 I'm going to pull for a chat about a contract. And moderator, would you ask our public about the consent items?
Sure. So if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on an item in the consent part of the agenda, those are the F items. We need to pull it in advance to be commented on later in the meeting. Please raise your hand if you'd like to comment on an F item in the agenda. There are no hands raised.
Thank you, Beth. We are moving right to public comment on non-agenda items, an opportunity for the public to speak to the board on non-agenda items. Beth, you want to take that over?
Sure. And do we have 2 minutes, President Fong?
I think we are going to limit that to 2 minutes tonight, because I believe we are going to have quite a bit to say on E1.
Okay, so this is the time when members of the public should raise their hands if they want to comment on a non-agenda item, something that is not coming up on our agenda. So that means, for example, return to in-person learning, fall 2021 is on the agenda. So you would save your comments for that item. But if you have something that is not on the agenda, please raise your hands at this time and watch the clock, because we have 2 minutes per comment. And our comment is from John Richardson.
Hello. I wanted to comment on the brochure from the Sonoma County Office of Education 2021 Spotlight on Sonoma County Schools. Yesterday, I sent an email asking, they mentioned they're offering a full credential scholarship to diverse teacher candidates who already have their bachelor's degree through the North Coast School of Education. So I sent email to the principals of the superintendent of schools and the North Coast School of Education, asking is there a racial qualification to be eligible to participate in this program? And I didn't hear back an answer to the question, but that was just yesterday. So I don't know the answer to that. The way it's worded, it sounds like there might be. I did kind of a hypothetical itinerary, what it would cost to send somebody down to Arkansas, Mississippi to spend a couple of days recruiting historical Black colleges, recruiting. That is, encouraging applications. I don't know, maybe something like that's already been done. Costs like under $1,500 airfare and all of that, and probably less to send people into the LA area to the predominant Hispanic majority state colleges in that area to recruit. But maybe, I don't know, maybe something like that's already been done. Thank you. Now.
Thank you. President Fong, there are no other hands raised for comment on non-agenda items.
Thank you, commenter. All right, we are moving to reports. Do we have a CSEA report up first?
There will be no report this evening.
And we have a Santa Rosa Teachers Association report tonight.
Yes, Ms. Howell's on her way over.
Good evening, everybody. Excuse me, President Fong and Superintendent Trinnell and members of the board. I'm Catherine Howell, President of Santa Rosa Teachers Association. Happy to be here tonight. Today, our members are feeling gratified because we have a TA in process, almost ready for ratification for our return to school safety processes and guidelines after a month of tough negotiations. We're also gratified we're one step closer to an MOU for the independent study program. Our educators are watching and waiting for those jobs to show up in EdJoin because it's time to get those students assigned to long-term teachers. We know that families and students and teachers have been a little bit confused by the lack of information that's been coming out about the independent study program, and SRTA hopes that some super clear updates will be able to explain the impending changes that are going to be coming up and affecting all of the families that are involved in that program. The start of this school year has been a challenge, one after another. A lot of confusion among teachers and a lot of mixed messages from administrators about process, procedure around COVID tracing, contact tracing, quarantine students, when the quarantines start, when they end, providing homework to the quarantine students and how soon should that start and what sort of homework and what method is proper for delivery of that particular homework. Then we have a new ARIES system and the temporary, we're hoping temporary loss of lots of critical information about the students in our care. We don't have basic health data like who's got asthma kind of information. We don't have access to the student transcripts that, especially like our Ridgeway teachers really need to make appropriate choices for the students' enrollment. So we still feel a little bit like we're flying blind, and we're asking the board, we're asking the district administration to create some really clear processes and procedures for the students, for the families, for the educators, for our administrators, so that we know what's going on, so we can stay safe, we can stay healthy, and most importantly, we can stay in school. Because some days it feels like we're not going to succeed with that, with such high rate of absenteeism and, sort of startling numbers of students with COVID. So I hope you can take all of these comments and all the comments of everyone who speaks tonight into account. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, the return to school and IGPs and the LCAP revisions and the financial health of the district. So, just thank you for listening, and I hope that you consider everything I've said here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, President Howell. We have a superintendent's report tonight. Superintendent Chanel.
Good evening. Thank you, Board President Fong, members of the board, and community. Today marks day 19 of school. I have certainly enjoyed being out at school sites. I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a moment. I do want to take a moment, though, and in hearing, President Howell, I do want to take a moment to recognize how hard our staff, our students, and our families are working to ensure that we continue to have our schools open full-time, in person, 5 days a week. As I continue to visit schools every week, I see staff who are doing everything they can to ensure that our students are supported and learning in a positive environment. I see students engaging with staff, friends, and classmates, and I feel the energy that's coming from learning together. I also recognize that we've experienced some new challenges this school year that have pushed us to think about our practices. What I have seen as a result is people willing to go the extra mile to ensure that we keep students at the center of our work. And I have witnessed the grace that people are giving each other as we navigate what school is like right now. I want to emphasize that we are listening. We are listening to our families. We are listening to our students, our staff, and our community. We are taking all of what we're hearing into account as we continue to build our opportunities and availability of services and information. We are committed to supporting our students in growing and learning to be their best selves. And I'm excited to hear more from our students and staff on my future visits to schools about what they are learning. I hope you all will also have that opportunity. As we continue to do our work together, I am encouraged by the opportunities for learning new ways to approach what we do, and also thinking about those things collaboratively. So please continue to communicate. We are going to do the same, and we're going to strengthen what we've already been doing. Thank you, Board President Fong. I hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask board members for a volunteer who'd like to give a board member report tonight. I see no hands up. Let me get back to you. I will say this for my board president report. In speaking to several students and several teachers over the past couple weeks in terms of resiliency, because I've been asked to give a talk, and another thing that I've been asked to do as an individual, as an educator, not as the board president, but as an educator, lifelong educator, what is going on with kids? How can kids be helped, and what is going to help them do well in school and be resilient? And it comes down to one thing always, always, always. And it is how we treat them. It is the relationship that we have with them. Every single adult to every single kid, how we treat them, how we welcome them, how we affirm them, how we unconditionally love them, how we respond when they are doing something that's sideways, how we respond when they don't have their homework, how we respond when it looks like they are not caring when really they're depressed, or that the trauma of COVID and income in their household or whatever it is has gotten the better of them. And how we respond dictates how that child will respond to us. And so, we're talking about masking, and we're talking about vaccines, and we're talking about assessment and falling behind and all of that. And finally, what it comes down to is how do we engage our whole child? And we're doing quite a bit of that, and we have lots of people to help us. But finally, if you're the adult in front of a kid, that makes a difference. How you say things to that kid, how you treat that kid makes a difference. It could make the whole day for that child or that teenager. So I just want to keep encouraging people. That's what kids are looking for, to be seen, to absolutely be seen, even in their sadness and in their trauma and in their own, what am I not enough? And the magic happens when that adult bolsters that child. And it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference between a good grade and a failing grade. It makes all the difference between absenteeism and coming to school. And it makes all the difference between graduating or not graduating. So I just want to, again, thank every single adult who offers that to a child or a teenager, and to keep checking ourselves when we're tired and we're traumatized also, and we're at our wits' end and we're frustrated, that we continue to keep doing that. And thank you for doing that. Thank you so much when you're so tired. So that wasn't really a report, but that was what I had to say. All right, board members, anything else? And student board member George Beard, you also get to say something if you'd like, a report.
I texted you. I don't know if it'll go through. Can you hear me?
Let's try it. Turn your video off and try it again.
Can you hear me? Is that better?
Okay, keep going.
Okay. I would just like to mention how every kid that I've talked to is just super grateful to be on campus, and we're all really aware of how hard administration is working to keep us on without going back online. I think that's sort of one of the things that kids have been worried about. At my school, at least, there have been some question on whether we are going to end up having to go back after Thanksgiving, because we had a mask mandate at lunch and brunch where we were outside. It went from not necessary to have masks to recommended that we have masks. So we were a little unsure about that, but as long as we're staying in person, everyone is really happy and really appreciative.
Good to hear. Thank you so much.
Did that come through? I cannot help.
Most of it came through.
Okay, we got most of it. Trustee Beard, thank you so much. And thank you again for being on the board and as a student board member. Do we have a CSBA report tonight? Director Medina, CSBA delegate?
No report.
All right, we're moving into E items. We are going into number 1. It's discussion. It's the return to in-person learning for fall of 2021. Superintendent Trinnell.
Thank you, Board President Fong and members of the board. If we could be sure that we bring Mr. Mazzara over. Thank you. We have information to share with you tonight that is a continued update of where we are in the return to in-person learning. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Mazzara for some COVID safety plan updates. But as I mentioned in my superintendent's report, we are committed to in-person learning 5 days a week. It certainly has had its challenges. I will not, sugarcoat that. And we have staff that are working extremely hard to make sure that we are meeting the needs as much as possible. As you've heard from our student board member, as well as others, people are happy to be back. Students are happy to be back. And in general, our staff is happy to be back. We are at school sites daily, if not weekly. Many of our site administrators, as well as our district administrators, are in classrooms teaching students directly, as well as independent study. So we are getting firsthand, best-hand experience in what it is like to be a teacher in this new way that we're returning to in-person learning. We have back to school nights that are happening. Our elementary virtual back to school night was last Thursday. This week, we have our high school back to school night, which will be virtual. And our families most likely have already received communication about that and what the plans are. And if not, I suggest that you reach out to your high school office so that you can get the information that you need. I know that our sites will continue to message this. Middle school will take place virtually on September 23rd. And again, if you have not heard about this information, please do reach out to your child's teachers and to the office so that we can ensure we have the correct contact information for you so that we can ensure you're getting future communications from us. The last piece that I'll share is that we will be holding a special board meeting on September 15th that will be focused on COVID, our practices, our procedures, and our safety plans. And there will also be a study session on this topic on September 15. That meeting will be virtual and it will start at 5 p.m. We will share more information at the beginning of next week about how to log in and what the official topics are. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Mazzara.
President Fong, board members, Superintendent Trinnell, and audience, thank you. That's a good place for me to pick up. Is one of the things we're doing is our teams are actually building recommendations to the board and some ideas around that plan. So that's been a lot of what we've been working on this week, getting feedback from school sites. I've had weekly drop-in meetings with both administrators and school site staff to kind of hear about the things that are happening and not happening and trying to develop that into a coherent plan. One of the things we've done since our last board meeting is we've increased testing for employees. We've gone to Mondays and Wednesdays here at the district office. So I just completed, we had 87 employees come through here this afternoon from 2 to 5. And we're doing the same thing on Wednesdays here at the district office. We've also started testing at a Lewis educational facility, Layla Learning Academy, excuse me, Janelle. And it's for Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 5, and that's for parents. And so we did that on Tuesday, and we had over 95 families come through in the day. So that's one of the changes that we've done as well. In addition to that, in support of what's called the modified quarantine, the modified quarantine is when either students or staff that are vaccinated, despite if they may have been a close contact, they are still allowed to stay in school, stay in place. And if you're unvaccinated, you're allowed to stay as long as you have no symptoms, but you're able to take a test during that quarantine time. So what we've been doing is we've been supporting by going out to school sites every day and taking that group of close contact at the elementary level who obviously have not had the chance for vaccination. And we're testing them in school, pulling them out just for moments while with parent consent, because they've gone through and signed up for our swabbing process. We're doing that at the school site as best we can. And so we've been going to 2 to 3 schools every day for the last week and trying to make that as least interruptive as possible and keeping kids in school. So that's another major change we've done. The other thing is we just are publishing increased protocols for teachers in classrooms. As an example, at the last board meeting, we didn't have a quarantine code that's pulled in Aries. So we now have a Q code. And so teachers, when they see a Q, they know that student is not supposed to be in their classroom. And so we work out with the attendants and the health techs how to put that quarantine code in there. And it's very easy for a teacher just to simply have that student come back to the school, back to the health office for clarification. They could be completely cleared to come back. They just didn't come through the office first. And so that's one of the changes we've done in that process. And then another change working with teachers is our close contact protocols. We've really specified what the close contact people, usually the principal and or one of the people like the isolation attendant, to contact teachers, to talk to them about their activities, their seating charts, and to try to describe whether or not the student had multiple contacts in the class. So that's been another change that we've been doing at each and every time. And then where you said we went live, and then just there's a board item tonight, contract additions to increase some temporary staff so we can staff and get prepared for the increasing site testing that we may be doing, providing site testing at school sites for staff, potentially for students, pending board item next week. But we are beginning to get those processes in order so we can support more students and staff as we do weekly testing. So that's it from the COVID side of the house. I'll turn it over to Mr. Shepard for Human Resources.
Thank you, Executive Director Mazira, President Fong, members of the board, Superintendent Trinnell. I have some updates from Human Resources. Just a brief staffing update. We are continually accepting applications for both classified and certificated substitutes. So we're continuing to process those candidates and getting them online so that they can be in classrooms. As President Howell mentioned, we are excited to have reached an agreement with our return to school safety guidelines. And we're also very close on our AB 130 MOU. And so that is proceeding very well. And we are beginning discussions with our CSEA partners to extend our isolation room MOU that has to do with staffing the isolation tents or areas. And they are currently partnering with us and continuing that work while we negotiate that MOU. And that's working very well. I have an update for our vaccination status that we're collecting for staff. And I have an update as of today that's more current than what you have before you. To this day, 60% of staff have completed the form. And so that's encouraging with a couple of weeks in, and we have a couple more weeks to continue to collect information. And of those, 908 staff out of 1540 are fully vaccinated. And then we have a few that have either declined to state or have stated they are not vaccinated. So that collection is going well, and we will continue to push out reminders and encourage collection and assist folks who may have a barrier or an issue to doing that. And so that concludes my portion, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Armstrong.
Thank you. Good evening, President Fong, members of the board, Superintendent Trinnell, members of Santa Rosa City Schools, and guests. My name is Dr. Armstrong, Associate Superintendent of Educational Services. I'm going to prepare to share my screen so that I can go through the slides. That's also an attachment in the board packet on enrollment. So 1 second while I pull that up. So 1 second, sorry. Okay, I think I am there. And it's not from the beginning. So let me take it all the way back. All right, I have several slides prepared. I will point to them as a reference, and I will not be going over in great detail, but I am certainly available for questions as they arise. This data is as of September 2nd. So the enrollment report basically just shows the distribution of students by site and by level, starting off first with elementary, KA through 6th grade, showing the public school sites. And you can see that distribution across grades. Looking at the middle school, 4 public middle schools, grades 7 and 8. Oops. Our high schools. My computer is wanting to jump ahead, but you're able to see our enrollment across sites. And then enrollment distribution by site for our charter schools, the dependent charter schools. X's indicating that that grade is not served at that site. And then this slide here shows the total student population by ethnicity and gender, showing our total population at 15,253 as of September 2nd. And then the ethnicity and gender breakdown. And then what I did was pull a report for each of the sites, and each of the sites, you'll see that there's a graph that shows the gender and the ethnicity broken down for each location. They're sort of clustered in by area. So we start off with couple there, and there's multiple pages, so I'll just kind of scroll through for quick glances, if you will. Okay, so that's our enrollment at our sites. And so I hope that you find that report useful. That's just basically broken down by gender and ethnicity. The next two pieces that I'd like to talk about are the Assembly Bills 130 and 104, and this data is as of September 2nd. The first one being Independent Study, AB 130, showing the enrollment by ethnicity. This is our numbers is grown. I think this number shows 354, and right now we're at 412. So that's a week later. But you're able to see who's accessing the independent study program by ethnicity. I also show what the number of students are based on socioeconomic disadvantage. So students who qualify for free and reduced lunch are identified as students who are low income. And then the unduplicated student count. And then the percentage for language access, so our students who are in the English language program, those who have exited, those who arrived being able to speak English, and then English only. So looking at that chart to see the subgroups. The other piece that I'd like to report on Assembly Bill 130 is that we've launched family and student orientation by video. We have both English and Spanish, and over the last several weeks, we have been meeting with families, showing the videos, and then or before the videos, going through the material that's in the videos and then available for questions. And that's the first step in enrolling in independent study. After attending orientation and understanding what the program is and what it isn't, enrollment begins, and students are loaded into courses, and their instruction begins within 3 days of attending the orientation. So for Assembly Bill 104, I have some demographic data on our pass, no pass. And so just a reminder on Assembly Bill 104, it was 3 parts to that Assembly Bill. The first part, which I'm going to go over tonight with numbers, is the pass, no pass option. That was for the month of August. 15 days after the start of school, where families and students had the opportunity to request a grade change to a pass if they received credit in a passing grade in a class, or no pass. And the significance of that is the weight on the grade point average, and the overall, overall grade point average. So the number of students that accessed that program was 763. I have the numbers and the percentages by ethnicity, and you're able to also see the socioeconomic and the unduplicated student count. Drilling down a little bit further, I have some demographic data by the mark. And so 763 for students receiving a pass or a no pass. Students who had grade changes for a pass, and there's 644, but let me just note that the 763 are represented in those two numbers. So these numbers are duplicated, not unduplicated. So there were 644 students that had at least a pass mark changed, and 552 students who had at least a no pass changed. And you're able to see that across the table by demographic. And then the other table that I'd like to show is the number of changes. So this one is non-duplicated. So that total equals the number of students. So 194 students with 1 to 2 changes, and you can see that demographic data. And then 285 students had 3 or 6 grade changes. And then 284 had 6 or more grade changes. Okay. So the other part that I wanted to mention on AB 104, which I think I skipped as I got a little excited about going through the numbers. The other 2 parts are the graduation exemption clause, where students who are class of 2022 and class of 2021 are able to access the California graduation requirements for this academic year. We have a staff person identified who was a part of registering students in AB 104, and starting next week, they'll transition to phone calls and outreach as a follow-up as we've communicated with families about the graduation exemption. We want to personalize it and have one-on-one calls with a bilingual speaker. So we're excited about that work starting. And then the other part of AB 104 is retention. And that is happening at the site. So that's a local endeavor where families have the option of requesting retention depending on how their student was impacted during the academic year 2021 during the pandemic. And so that work is happening, and I'm hoping that we'll have some numbers and are able to report out on that. I can tell you though, that the number is really small on that. And that concludes my report on enrollment, Assembly Bill 130 and Assembly Bill AB 104. So with that, I will pass it to Rick. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, President Fong, Superintendent Chernell. Going over a couple of things in brief of importance, starting with facilities. As I talked about at our last meeting, our director, Eric Oden, along with Rafael Sanabria, our head custodian, really want to ensure that classrooms and sites are being cleaned to the standard that we expect at this point, and have implemented as of this week a new check and balance system, if you will, in terms of trying to review our visit and check on every classroom at least once weekly to ensure that the cleaning that we say is being done, and then taking proactive steps in the event that it's not, including working with site personnel to ensure that all rooms continue to remain at a clean standard. We're also closely monitoring HVAC units, either through the systems that we have in place at many of our school sites, or through our custodians at each of our sites, and responding to issues as quickly as we can. We've had some issues with cooling in rooms, but we've still kept air filtration going in our rooms through the start of this year, which hats off to the team, and they tried to address any issues that have come up as quickly as they can in regards to any issues with airflow in classrooms. Moving into areas, and one of the conversations that we had, I think the last 2 board meetings, was about parent support for the new system and getting parents on board. As Rand, our director of data, who is overseeing the areas implementation, continues to move forward with full implementation of resources in that system. We're also working on that plan right now to include parents in future training, both in English and Spanish, and tying it not only just to areas and parent portal access, but to Parent Square, as well as how they can use that as a tool in addition to the parent portal. Doing outreach and holding these meetings either virtually or in person, depending on location and need. So we're working out the timeline, if you will, and the details of that in coordination with Ed Services and a couple of their departments that we will also use to help us get this message out and to reach as many parents as we can who require assistance with either program as we go forward. I will also say that as we go through the start of the school year, Aries is continuing to be updated daily by our data team and integration team, getting more and more information available as quickly as we can, including information that teachers need for their classrooms, as well as front office staff, and ensuring that everything in there is correct based on what was in Illuminate when we transitioned out of that system. So that will be ongoing work, and we'll share progress on that as we continue to move forward. The next area that I'd like to speak about is CNS, or Child Nutrition Services. As of, I believe as of today, our average daily participation in our secondary schools has increased by over 200%. In elementary school, it's increased for breakfast by 76% and for lunch by about 20% on a daily basis. So more people are taking advantage of the opportunity for these meals and eating them on a daily basis. Important to note that with CNS, and we're going to talk about this with bus drivers in just a second, there is a nationwide supply and labor shortage for food and materials coming to CNS. CNS has been shorted on every order to date for this year, but having a large on-site inventory has enabled us to ensure adequate food quantities on a daily basis. And we're doing our best to stockpile our needed items so they're there as we continue on through this year. We're also looking at labor issues within CNS. We have several jobs posted right now that we're trying to fill to ensure that school lunches and breakfasts can be served on a daily basis. But it is pretty phenomenal, the increase that we've seen this year to date. And remember, this year, all students are eligible for breakfast and lunch at our school sites, as well from the federal government, and next year through the state of California, that same opportunity for students will be available. The last area I wanted to bring up was busing. We're continuing, as I said last week, to work with Bus County to make sure that students are picked up who ride the bus and are delivered to school. West County Transportation Agency is also still trying to fill positions and routes. The biggest issue right now that all members of the JPA are facing, and to us, is special ed transportation. with the shortage of drivers, they have their entire staff that's eligible to driving on a daily basis to try and ensure that students are picked up on time and dropped off on time. There has been several conversations happening with West County that are starting with the West County Board, looking at extracurricular activities, including field trips and sporting events that they are having trouble providing busing for with the shortage of drivers, especially when they occur during the peak pickup in the morning to deliver to school and the peak pickup to take home after the school day. So a lot of, I'll give Mr. Barksdale, the executive director of West County, some praise in terms of he's doing everything he can right now with the limited staff that he has in terms of total number of drivers. This, much like the food shortage, is not just at West County Transportation Agency. The whole transportation industry is seeing labor shortages across different sectors that provide transportation, as well as school busing in general. So as they continue to make changes for increased performance and trying to find drivers both for the school buses and what are Class C drivers that can drive the small vans to assist, we'll keep the board updated. With that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Mazzara, who has some additional information.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. I want to just make sure two important things that I didn't mention at the outset. First of all, is around screening and testing. We want to make sure that we are not testing students that are symptomatic. And so what I want to make sure that in our conversations that we've had with people, and just as you have them and as people processing, we are not set up at this point to do symptomatic testing. That is something we are hoping to do that requires a level of health employees and other protocols that are far more stringent than what our ability to get workers are. So I know Superintendent Turnell is working on something with our partners, and we hope we can announce that shortly. But at this point, our testing is only for non-symptomatic cases. And then the other thing I wanted to throw out is we published our dashboard, and I want to show where that is at our website. There's two places to get it. Under school information is one quick way. And right there, those are our flyers. And then there's a COVID dashboard. And many thanks to my COVID partner, Caitlin Pinella, for helping kind of design this. I'm in the middle of kind of reworking some things, trying to keep it with updated information, and not all the information, but not all the information has been updated. We put together some English and Spanish FAQs, a lot of questions that I've had from families. If I failed to mention, we have a COVID hotline that we now answer calls from. I'm talking to families, I'm talking to staff. We have a COVID concern form that we log, and I work with staff. And so part of the feedback we get are things about what are the rules around my return. There's information about information around what test is required. That's a big one. And so I'm trying to just make this really super friendly and link the more detailed things that are in there that you could go down the rabbit hole with CDPH if you want, but I'm trying to just make some couple things here real quick and easy for us. And then more importantly, perhaps to many in the public, is we are beginning to throw out some of our data that we've accumulated. We've broken this out data a little differently than last time. We are talking about only confirmed cases. County Public Health 2 weeks ago changed what they want from us. They no longer have the capacity to go through suspected cases and everyone that gets sent to the isolation tents, and they're only tracking for us or asking us to track confirmed positives. So this is the data that will update weekly. It'll update on Friday evening, and we'll put that data out there. We think it's a good place. It's not as inclusive as we could have, but I want to be clear that our county, excuse me, our county is working also, I understand, just this afternoon from Public Health to work on a dashboard with far more intense data that is specific by zip codes. And I don't want to interfere with that. Also, the kind of data we're taking is voluntary right now. Well, maybe once we get to a mandated portion of data collection, then the numbers will be a little more statistically valid. But right now, we may not be getting everything that's even reported. And then two other things we've linked there. This is our address COVID safety concerns. And then just some quick links if everyone's looking, board members, yourself, members of the public, if you're just wanting to have a library of what the current deadlines or guidelines are, I'm kind of putting them and organizing them. We have everything from the recent sports and VAPA updates. And so when we put something out, we'll put a guidance here and we can kind of gather those in one place. So with that, thank you, Superintendent for Trammell, for allowing me to come back to that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a quick question or request? On that data on like cases, Steve, is it possible to add like maybe like a little bar graph to show like the increase over time of cases reported? Just like a visual representation.
Same data, just put a visualization to it?
Yeah, add it to it if possible.
Yeah. Let me, when my office staff comes on board, I will love to do that for you. Yes.
Superintendent, was that the report?
Thank you. That is the conclusion of our report, and I will hand it back over to you, Board President Fong.
Thank you, team. Board members, questions? Clerk Flores?
Thank you, Board President. Maybe this is a request also. I noticed that the back to school night for the high school is tonight. For future references, are we able to, stagger those so that we're not, doing a board meeting when there's a back to school night or a big event like that? And that's it for now. I'll come back later. Thank you.
Sorry, Director Flores, I just realized the date is incorrect. The high school back to school night is on the 9th.
Okay.
That date should be the 9th. So when I said tomorrow, I meant the 9th, not tonight. So that's a correction. And that's on me. So thank you for catching that.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't catch the fact that they say tomorrow. I just wrote down the date. I was like, oh, because it's virtual. I wanted to go, catch some of that. All right. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, I see none, so I'm going to open it up to public comment at this point. And we are going to see if students would like to speak.
Right. So if there are any students who'd like to comment on item E1, please raise your hands at this time. Students only first. And now we'll open it up for anyone who would like to comment on item E1, the return to in-person learning. Please raise your hand. And Veronica Jordan would like to comment.
Good evening, school board and superintendent. This is Veronica Jordan, parent of first grader and fifth grader at Cesar Chavez. I want to say again, as I say every day, thank you so much for getting our children back to school. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't meet someone in a hallway at work or on the way to school who's just ecstatic that our children are back in school. So thank you very much. I guess I just have a couple of things that I wanted to ask. One is I hear that you're working on symptomatic testing support at the district level, but in the meantime, I'd really, really like to see the district push out clear information for parents who are really struggling to get kids tested. I would like our algorithm to not have option number 1 be keep your kid home for 10 days, but on the algorithm, it should say option number 1, get your kid tested. because many of our children don't have COVID and they should be back in the classroom as soon as possible. I know of several children who've been kept out for 10 days because parents just weren't able to get their child tested in a timely manner because we're working and trying to juggle a zillion things. So I appreciate that you're working on getting symptomatic testing up and running, and I hope you're working with the county. I hope the county is giving you adequate support. But in the meantime, I'd really like to see administrators sending out a weekly site of testing locations, because those change and parents need to know every day where those testing things are based on their needs. I'd also really like to see this part of the meeting include a discussion around what we're doing to address learning loss, what assessment has begun, and what we're going to do about that. And then finally, I'd like a clarity on the policy around siblings. If you're keeping one sick sibling home, does that mean that children of other siblings who are well need to be kept home? That has not been clear and consistent across the district, and that is a struggle and leads to more learning loss and more children out of school. So thanks for getting our kids back in school. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And next is Janelle Payne. Reminder, these are 2-minute comments on item E1.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Janelle Payne, teacher at Montgomery. I don't have prepared remarks tonight. I just wanted to thank you for the movement that is, I'm seeing tonight as far as protocol, routines, procedures, clear information. These are things I wish had been in place before the school year began. I think they should have been in place before we brought students and teachers and staff back into the rooms together, but alas, here we are. I do, though, have concern that much of what's been presented tonight has not been communicated clearly to staff, nor has it been communicated clearly to our families. And so it's great to hear. I am encouraged by what I'm seeing tonight, but the Q code, for example, that's supposed to be closing a gap to teachers, you've not communicated that to teachers clearly. So how do we know that that's now the procedure we're following? So I do want to see a lot more communication coming to staff about what these procedures are, what changes have been made, how this is impacting us, and our families need this information too. So just credit where it's due. Thank you for getting these things together. Thank you for communicating this out. And I look forward to the clear communication, district-wide about these new procedures and routines. And that's all.
Thank you. Next is Deborah Ramos. And Deborah needs to be promoted to comment. Deborah, could you unmute, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with Janelle Payne about the new attendance codes. They are confusing for teachers. And it feels to me like there's kind of been some balls dropped that more people should be encouraged to test. Having students stay home for 10 days and not testing does not do anyone any good. It doesn't give us a clear picture of how COVID could be spreading in our schools, who might be a possible close contact. They should have a chance to be notified sooner. And if they're not positive, then they should be able to come back to school sooner. I really think we need to step up the encouraging students to get tested. I had one student who was out since August 25th and was marked a COVID concern initially on the attendance. Then I spoke to administrators and was told, I said that he had taken his mask off 3 times the day before and when he was in my class. And they said they weren't concerned about contact tracing because he hadn't had a positive test. And this week we were notified he finally had a positive test and I was asked to do contact tracing. So it seems like there's, issues and procedures need to be smoothed out and put into place more effectively. And I think a lot of it's a lack of communication. I don't think anybody really knows what to do with anything about anything. It's
kind of horrific in my opinion. Thank you for the time for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mama Latia Vetting.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I have a few things and I probably run out of time, but I had a question about the AB 130, the independent study program. I'm wondering if that's funded the same way as regular independent study. It sounds like the independent study 130 is more COVID related, and myself, as well as a few other parents, enrolled their children in independent study, and they ended up falling into this AB 130 spot, which is different than a regular independent study. And I had nobody call me or ask me about why I was putting my child in independent study. And I kind of feel like maybe the school district is benefiting financially from that regular more than the regular. And I think there needs to be some transparency there. I also feel like all this talk about learning loss really frustrates me because, as the previous spoker just said, I know numerous children, especially my own in our junior high, that have been sent home for just a migraine, just a stomach ache, just a little bit of diarrhea. And these parents too, in particular, waited in line for hours at Conningtown Mall to take a test and pay out of pocket to be sent back to the school and told that test isn't good enough. And I think that's ridiculous. And these kids are out of school for 10 days. And if pre-COVID our kids were out of school, you guys would be calling us and reporting us to truancy. But what do you know? I think it boils down to money. And no matter if our kids are in school or not, the district gets paid. So now our kids are sitting home. So the learning loss to me is BS. I'm out of time, so I'll raise my hand again. Thanks.
Thank you. And President Fong, there are no other hands raised for this item.
This is a discussion item, board members. Any other comments or discussion? Director De La Cruz.
Thanks. I just wanted to share a couple of resources. The Latinx Now, the equity work group at the County of Sonoma has worked really, really hard with our epidemiologists and our data specialists. And I want to give a special shout out to my co-director, Stephanie Magnetti, who serves on that work group, to really make information accessible to folks, regardless of what language they speak or with regard to what language they speak. And to also make testing information pretty accessible and hopefully easy to find a place to get tested. And this is for both folks who are symptomatic as well as asymptomatic. And so I just wanted to, I don't know if it's possible for me to share my screen and just show kind of folks where to find things, or if I should drop it into the chat, but essentially it's socoemergency.org or socoemergencia.org. And you can find their information that includes, understanding kind of cases by age group over the last 60 days. You can find information about kind of geographic cases are located. You're looking at kind of new cases by date. So it really helps, I think, our community to understand the level of risk that we are currently undertaking, as well as, ways in which to mitigate it with vaccine clinic information and testing information. So like I said, we've worked really hard to make that information accessible to everybody in our community. And I just want to make sure that folks know that that's also a very important resource to really support the work that our board and our district is doing, kids and their families safe, and just make sure that folks know about that information. And I want to just add my request for some really good graphics, Director Mazzara, and follow up on Director Medina's request, because I think it does really help people to see and to understand, and with some real clarity, some good hard data, what's happening. Thank you.
Director De La Cruz, would you give that website one more time, please?
Sure. I'm going to put it into the chat for everyone. So it's socoemergency.org or socoemergencia.org en español. And you can dig around there for a little bit. I'll show kind of, this is the interactive database. I'll drop a kind of link to in the chat where you can really play with demographics, including age and ethnicity and race and geography of new cases. Looking at also, let's see here if I can find Sonoma County testing and tracing sites all over the county with information about hours and days for pop-up tests. Hopefully this helps folks who are really looking to lessen the number of days that their kids are out of school to get quick results that can be turned back over to the district in order to facilitate their return to school.
Thank you. Vice President McCormick.
Can everyone in the public see those links that she just put in the chat? Dr. Trustee De La Cruz? And if not, where could we publish that? Is very helpful. Just maybe circle back in a little while and say, hey, we'll publish that blank, or can we move it? Can Adina move it to something everyone can see or something like that? Yes, Superintendent, I'm sure you have a brilliant idea on how to do this.
Thank you. Yes, we will. This is the first I'm hearing about these resources. So we will absolutely make sure that they're shared along with the other links that we've been sharing. And thank you, Director De La Cruz, for sharing those.
I'm hearing from folks that yes, they can see it.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Awesome. And then I just wanted to make just a really brief comment and give some kudos to Dr. Armstrong for sharing the data and metrics that you provided regarding attendance tonight. And it is you did go through it fast because there's a lot of information there. And when you do a deep dive, it definitely reveals some interesting things I think we need to talk about. But I just want to say I appreciate you collecting that data and putting it together for us and having it current as of September 2nd, which is very helpful for us as we move forward and look at where we're at and where we need to be. So thank you, Dr. Armstrong.
And Director Manieri.
Thank you. I just wanted to also follow up on the resources that Director De La Cruz shared. I'm a visual learner, and so I'm not an auditory learner. I really need the visuals to be able to process information. The county actually, kudos to the county for actually creating some great visuals about where vaccine clinics are available every single week. So that's also a resource that I'm happy to share with you, Superintendent, if you want to share that with maybe our communications folks so that can get out. But that does come out on a weekly basis. I don't know how many folks knew that on this Tuesday, just yesterday, there was a vaccine clinic in the evening at Pioneer High School. So this is a really great resource that I'm happy to share on a weekly basis so that it gets out to the community.
All right, seeing no other hands, I just want to thank the team and thank you to the commenters and the people who have written to us and written also to the Superintendent.
President Fong, Ed and I raised our hands and we've been waiting for a while.
You know what? Now that I'm on my laptop and I see everybody, I'm looking for your little hand, and your little hand is hidden away by your picture. I'm really sorry. And your hand, Ed, I see it over on your wallpaper. Clerk Flores, go. Your turn. Thank you for speaking up.
Okay, I just want to reiterate what what Director McCormick said. I just want to thank everyone, all the staff for working together to make sure that we had a very cohesive and thorough presentation. Dr. Armstrong, thank you so much for the attachment and the information that you included. Rick, thank you for discussing the fact that we are going to do, ARIES training both in English and Spanish. It doesn't go unnoticed. I just want to say thank you for going out of your way to do that. I just want to point out some percentages here, right? According to the data presented tonight, we have our Latinx population is about 56.87%, versus in our Caucasian population is about 28.66%. And I couldn't help but notice that in the AB 104 for pass, no pass report, we had about 42.5% of our Latino students or Latinx students submit a grade change. And then we had 42.4% of our white students do that. So that's just, to me, it's just indicative of maybe a harder push of information and future endeavors from the board to make sure that folks who may benefit from something like that, could, take advantage of it, right? And once again, thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough.
Clerk Flores, I would absolutely agree. If we're really taking the equity lens, let's look at, who's applying for what and who's being affected. And that was a huge push for AB 130, or 104 also out quickly, the two of them out quickly. Thank you, staff, for doing that. Director Sheffield.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. And I know we'll be having more discussion on September 15th. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about learning loss. And I appreciate the district's priority being on physical and social and emotional health, maybe over academic assessment at this time. But I've read that this is sort of the prescribed pedagogical recommendations backed by child psychologists. And as a parent who stayed home with kids while balancing working from home through all of last year and the pandemic, I think the issue that I have with the term learning loss is that it applies to a loss of skill or a loss of knowledge. And it implies that students hadn't learned during the shutdown the valuable skills that we know that they needed and that they learned: life skills, problem solving, definitely computer and tech skills, and crisis management, which, every day in my house during remote learning, we had a crisis. Multitasking, working independently, teaching younger siblings, compassion towards parents, and coping skills. And I think also the term learning loss insinuates that learning only happens within the classroom, and that, all students around the globe collectively experienced and are experiencing the pandemic simultaneously. So I just want, I know we're setting things up for the 15th to have further discussion. And, if we're looking at calculating knowledge and what could have been missed throughout last year, I think it's sort of an arbitrary measurement, and it's kind of like measuring opportunity. But we can't really do that in this case either, because being out of school was a shared experience by all of our students as well. So I hope that our decisions aren't based on assumptions that our kids are operating in a deficit, or that we lower expectations for our students. There were some comments during public comment that, again, was using the term learning loss, again, insinuating that there is some type of lost knowledge and there's going to be a lot of catch up. And, I appreciate the approach that we're taking. I appreciate that, again, we're focusing on physical and mental health right now. We know that that skills we might need to stress, I guess, learning or relearning certain skills. But, I just wanted to say that. It's something that's been on my mind. It's something that I have researched quite a bit over the summer. and that, I opening the door for further discussion on the 15th. I'm mostly speaking, again, to parents who have fear of learning loss. Thank you.
Director Medina.
Yeah, I just had maybe a question or request on the AB 104, the pass no pass. I'm wondering if there's any sort of like one-page handout or something that's given to parents or students in making that decision, and that explains kind of what it means to have a pass no pass and any impacts or pros cons that is explained to them in making that decision. If there is, if we can let us know if there is, and secondly, maybe you could share that with me and maybe the rest of the board members. Thank you.
Can I respond to that, or is it just a question?
But that already sunsetted, right?
Yeah.
It was a comment.
Okay.
And how it's administrative work in terms of what counselors do. I think certainly every year handling that kind of stuff too. I will just say just a couple responses to folks. Learning loss, absolutely. Ed Sheffield, absolutely learning loss. I just am right behind you on what you said. But I also know that when we hear about summer school, we're going to see how we've mitigated some of that. And actually, I would love to see how we can kind of continue summer school in school, because it's such a strong program and it really gets kids where, they are, and they were targeted and invited and also volunteer to go. So that was a really great, we're going to hear about that in a little bit. Also, I want to thank, everyone who's writing to us about how things are on the ground in terms of when I talked about how it is actually happening in the classroom, in the hallways, in the offices, because that's feedback. That's feedback to our directors. It's feedback to our superintendents in terms of how things are really happening and what's missing, where the gaps are. And I know that they're listening, and I know that they will be following up. So thank you for that. Dr. Armstrong, the data was good. Thank you for putting that in there also so that we could see it right away when we're reading the board report, over the weekend. Also, CNS, Ed Burke. We got some feedback this week, a lot of good feedback, and also why are we serving this, and this? But then I think one of the things was that we had a supply chain issue, and we're feeding everyone. This is huge. We are not set up for this. The system was not set up for this. And then there's a labor shortage on top of that. So I think we're doing a phenomenal job. And of course, Ed Burke and his department and team are always trying to do better. And I just constantly have to give them a shout out, because they are doing amazing work with a system that wasn't set up for what they're doing, and with fewer people than they would like to have. So, okay. And thank you for the dashboard, Steve. We're moving on. Am I missing anyone? Dr. Trunell, any last thoughts?
None for me, thank you.
All right.
Can I do one last thought?
Yes.
Please get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated. It is the safest and the easiest and the best way to keep our schools open and our kids in school learning. Please tell everybody to be loud and proud about your vaccination status. Normalizing these conversations in our community is a wonderful way of making sure that we are doing everything we can to lead and our kids in school and our schools open. If you have any questions about where to get vaccinated or where to get tested, please reach out. I'm happy to help. That's what we're doing every day at the County of Sonoma. So please do.
Item E2, action item, resolution 2021-22-12, recognize September 15th to October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month. And who has this item?
That would be Director De La Cruz.
Hey, thank you for handing it over. Superintendent Chanel, it is such a pleasure and an honor today to present the board's resolution 2021-22-12 to recognize September 15th to October 15th as Latinx Heritage Month. And I wanted to start by addressing our board's choice of the word Latinx. So our board made the shift in 2019 from Hispanic to Latinx. And when Superintendent Chanel and I were digging around in the history as to the why, we found that that was kind of the movement of the time throughout our country where other organizations made the shift. And so I thought it was good even to take us a couple of decades back, before 2019, to talk about the word Hispanic and where that comes from and the roots of that history for many of us who identify not as Hispanic, but in lots of other ways. So in 1968, that was the moment that President Lyndon Johnson signed Presidential Proclamation 3869, which launched a week-long celebration of histories and cultures and contributions of citizens of Hispanic origin to America's national heritage. And the choice of Hispanic, right? The choice of the word at that time in our nation's history is a really interesting thing to. So in 1968, at the time of that presidential proclamation, militant and nationalist young brown people organizing some for more than 10 years. And these movements were active and flourishing throughout the country. And my internet connection is unstable. Are you guys still able to hear me? Okay. So from the Brown Berets to the Latin Kings to the Young Lords, young Chicanos and Boricuas and Dominicanos and other kind of members of the Latin American diaspora living in the United States were actively organizing their communities to further self-determination and liberation of third world peoples in the United States. And these groups, although their members represented different places from the Latin American diaspora, were really grounded in an understanding and a celebration of their African roots. And with the recognition that liberation was only possible if our country was able to eradicate the racism that they faced on a daily basis from the institutions that targeted them, but didn't necessarily serve them. And these groups also worked in solidarity with the Black Panthers and other Asian American liberation movements at the time. So the choice of the word Hispanic here by the federal government was understood and felt by those groups as an attempt to erase that connection, both to their home countries, but also to their Afro and Indigenous roots, and instead to connect them to the European empires who colonized them and whose colonization resulted in mass genocide throughout Latin America. And so it's really with that kind of historical frame and with that critical look at the term Hispanic and how it really came into kind of use in the United States that I am celebrating this moment where our board has chosen to move away from that and to say that we're embracing the term Latinx, which for many of us who identify in lots of different ways from the Latin American diaspora, with that understanding that we are grounded in an understanding of our own histories as people who continue to survive attempts to colonize and to eradicate the places from which we come and the places that we fight every day to remain connected to and to celebrate. And so, and then another plug, right? Latinx, even though it's really complicated and hard to pronounce when you see it for the first time, is also a real celebration that that Spanish, right, despite how much I love the language, also is very gendered. And so it doesn't really create an opportunity for folks when we say just Latino or Latina to exist in that two-spirit space, right? And for folks who may not identify as male or female, who identify as queer, as genderqueer, as trans. And so the use of the term X here is something that, again, I really want to elevate for us to celebrate kind of the broadness of our identities as people who come from the Latin American diaspora with a real groundedness in our Indigenous and African roots. So it's with all of that that I'm excited to introduce this resolution today, to really kind of elevate and lift up the work that Brown folks throughout our country and throughout our community here have done to bring some flavor and some spice and some spirit and some deep historical connection to our communities, and to really kind of bring also some additional ways of learning and understanding our shared histories with each other. So I also have a couple of comments on the actual resolution, because I think we were working on some changes to it up to the time of this presentation that I'd love to talk through. So if it's okay for me to share my screen, we have a couple of additions and recommendations, if that's okay. So, here we go. Are folks able to see my screen? So we're looking at a Google Doc with some yellow lines in it. Okay.
Yes.
So what we've tried to do here, or what I tried to do here with some additional language that really gets at.
Enlarge it. I'll agree it, enlarge it.
Yeah, let's see. How's that? Okay. So what I
Better.
try to do here with some of this language is to encapsulate a little bit of that history lesson that I just shared. And these are some of the suggestions that I would like the board to consider tonight, as well as updating some of our 26 numbers with 2020 numbers. Census numbers are still coming out, trickling slowly, but they're there. And we have some updated numbers that we'd also like to recommend go into this resolution. So if you don't mind, I'll just read kind of the additional 4 whereases here. Whereas the term Hispanic both celebrates the colonization and erases the indigenous peoples of Latin America. Whereas the Board of Trustees of Santa Rosa City Schools works to create a culture of belonging in our school community. Whereas the terms to use to define people's individual and collective identities are both personal and institutional choices. And whereas the Board of Trustees of Santa Rosa City Schools chooses to utilize Latinx or Latine, terms that reflect the diversity of the individuals in our community who have Latin American roots. And then in this resolution, and invites community conversation around these choices. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And I will turn it back to you, Superintendent Trinnell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director De La Cruz. And with that, Board President Fong, the board would then entertain further discussion around the amendments to the resolution.
I'll agree. Did these replace other whereases?
Nope, they just slide right into the middle there,
Okay.
and they provide some transition between kind of the term Hispanic Heritage Month into Latinx Heritage Month.
Trustee Medina?
I move to accept the amendments as presented, if that's appropriate.
Does it need a second? I second.
Who was that? Was that Stephanie?
Yes.
All right, so questions, board? All right, we're going to take public comment on this.
So I'm going to lower all hands and ask that any students who'd like to comment on item E2, the resolution recognizing Latinx Heritage Month, please raise your hand at this time. Students first. And seeing no hands, anyone at all in the public who would like to comment on item E2, this resolution, please raise your hands. And there are no hands raised.
Thank you. Board, any other discussion or comments?
I wanted to just ping Clerk Flores because he caught the 2020 numbers. So I think that's an important addition as well, that we may just want a friendly amendment to Omar's initial motion and Stephanie's second. So it would be the additional whereases as well as updating to the 2020 numbers.
Director Medina, do you accept that?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute, but yes, I accept.
Director Medina, did you have your hand up again?
I was just going to follow up on the number situation, so I'm glad it was clarified. Thank you.
All right, no other comment. We can take that vote. It was nominated, motion by
Dr. President Fong, sorry, I raised my hand. I don't think you can see my hand.
Yes,
so, you can always
Ever.
go to,
Flores, I'm sorry. Please don't get a complex.
No, don't worry about it. I just want to say thank you to Director De La Cruz for adding those sentences. I don't know. I mean, to me, it means a lot. You know, I cringe every time I hear the word Hispanic because it completely erases, you know, the cultural aspect of, you know, where I come from. And I want to also thank you about, you know, discussing the diaspora that happened in the 1960s, 70s. I'm part of the Central American diaspora that happened in the 1980s because of the Central American Civil War and the Salvadorian War. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that, you know, you have a board member who's part of that. And I'm sure a lot of the board members here can relate to what I'm saying. Once again, I just want to say thank you, Director De La Cruz, for bringing this up.
You know, we put out quite a few resolutions. I want to make sure that we just aren't talking to ourselves. So I hope that we are pushing these out into the community and pushing them out to classrooms. We are ready for a vote. Adina.
Director Beard.
Aye.
Director Medina.
I said aye.
Oh, okay.
I think you took Georgia's vote though.
Let's go back to Georgia Beard.
Yes. Director Beard. Georgia, I can't hear you.
Maybe she can put it in the chat.
Georgia, you could do thumbs up.
She says she can't hear us and her sound is not working.
Okay.
Should I move on with the rest of the roll call for now?
Yeah, I'm going to text her really quickly.
Okay, thank you. Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. Okay, we're going to hang on to the provisional vote by, she said aye. Okay, she said aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Director De La Cruz. All of it. E3, discussion summer school 2021.
Thank you, Board President Fong. And this item will be addressed by Dr. Armstrong, Kelly Dillon, and Tim Zolinardo. And I believe they're being moved over now. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Armstrong.
President Fong, members of the board, Superintendent Trinnell, members of Santa Rosa City Schools, and guests, I'm excited to bring forth two of my executive directors, Kelly Dillon and Tim Zolinardo. While the summer session captured work across all of the priorities, I am reminded of our constant work in priority 2. And in educational services, we agree that addressing interruptions to wellness, learning, and social connections while advancing the achievement of each and every one of our students is what we show up to do every day. With that, I'd like to introduce Executive Director Kelly Dillon to start us off. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Good evening, President Fong, Superintendent Trinnell, members of the board, and the public. We are pleased tonight to be able to share with you a recap of this summer's extended learning programs. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so Mr. Zolinardo can get started. Let's hope you can see. Can you see okay? Yes? Okay, excellent. All right.
Great, thank you, Ms. Dillon. Good evening to Superintendent Trinnell, President Fong, members of the board, and the SRCS cabinet, and of course our SRCS community. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And thank you for having us to share with you about Extended Learning Summer Programs 2021. So I'll begin with just kind of going over an overview on the next slide. of our intentions. And this brings us back actually to the spring of 2021, when Ms. Dillon, myself, and other members of Santa Rosa City Schools talked about what we hoped summer school could and would be. One of the main things for all of us was to live up to the MVP, which Dr. Armstrong just spoke to, and really to balance priority one of these lifelong learners ready to go into the world and be critical thinkers. And at the same time, to balance that with the whole person and to realize that the social emotional wellness of our students and families was a key ingredient of what we needed to attend to. That included for us remediation and enrichment. I think we heard Trustee Sheffield speak eloquently to the idea that, this period of time in our lives is still being lived and experienced, and therefore we are still experiencing and living through learning. But it was important to remediate, and it was important to provide enrichment, to accelerate, and to address maybe some gaps, to make sure we did that all the way for KA, Kinder Academy, all the way through 12th grade. And of course, we wanted to make sure that we helped personal learning flourish as much as possible. And one of the things there is that you can lose a little bit of your school-going identity. Some of your academic, school-going, social identity in a pandemic, in isolation, you can lose your way a little bit there. And we wanted to make sure we gave students a chance to recalibrate how they are in school spaces and see themselves as learners. Of course, a key component is to ensure a path to graduation. That would be definitely through multiple things we do, including essential credit recovery, to avoid what I've spoken to in previous board meetings as the credit crunch. High school, you're on kind of a treadmill moving towards a goal, and there's something being accrued every semester, and any disruption can throw things off. And lastly, I just want to point to the image. Our idea was very akin to maybe what's symbolized in this image. We would cast a net. That net would be wide and broad. That net would be maybe deeper than ever before. And it would try to make sure that it captured a sense of academic success, that it captured an ability to socialize, that it captured joy in learning, that it captured a disruption to the disruption of the pandemic, that the net we would cast out in our summer programs would speak to the whole person and allow them to flourish and find their way to meaningful re-entries and re-experiencing of school in a more formal way. Thank you, Ms. Dillon.
This year, as Tim mentioned, we were really charged with providing summer programming that was more and longer. And in planning this, we considered providing a program that spanned the whole summer, whereas typically in years past, the focus was on the month of June. We wanted to offer multiple entry points to families, as well as a greater variety in the programs that were offered. We are pleased to share, as the numbers show here, that we were able to do that. As you can see this year, we served over 3,400 students, which is double what we have done in previous years. This included offering 24 programs, which is well above a more typical summer like 2019. In addition, we are pleased that we were able to increase our offerings through partnerships with local environmental education agencies, including Land Paths and Alliance Redwoods, which we look forward to speaking more about in the following slides. Each year we offer a summer program. The Elementary Academy, or KA6 Academy as we call it, is a program that we have offered traditionally every year. It is a program that is offered to support students who are identified as below grade level via local assessments and or site recommendations. This is a by invitation program in which we target students that teachers and staff and parents may identify as needing that additional support. It provides an opportunity for students to get additional instruction in math and English language arts, building on their skills and helping them to make growth and preparation for the next school year. This year's focus was on math and language arts, and we used our FOSS for One science kits to create an engaging kind of hands-on learning environment for students so that they were practicing that math and that reading through the content of science. And I'm sorry, I do not know how to get this black bar to not show. So
it's
I
all right.
apologize.
Thank you. So we also had extended school year. It is a part of summer's programming in Santa Rosa City Schools every summer. It's a mandatory part of serving and supporting students. It's definitely dedicated towards students who have individualized education plans. Maybe there's some challenge in their individual learning. And so one of the essential services is to make sure that students have a chance to meet their individual goals, which are collaboratively established in individualized education plan team meetings. And the idea is that sometimes in a typical year, especially in a pandemic school year, disrupted school year, reaching and meeting all of the individualized goals as articulated by the IEP team isn't always on the calendar of a school year, and that you might need more months and time developmentally with practice for a student to enhance their skills and enrich themselves and reach their goals to the furthest potential possible. So that program occurs yearly, occurred this summer school, and really supported our students and families with a little bit of that extra time that's needed, especially after the last year, to pursue those goals. And notice that it supports students in preschool all the way to transition age 22. It has a very wide range of support and really makes sure there's a foundation of care for our students to move forward successfully as academic students.
This year, we spoke about partnerships, and we've mentioned the many different partnerships we had in summer school. This year, we continued our partnership with Sonoma State's Excel for Youth program. That is a program that is really focused on providing hands-on enrichment classes for students taught by members of the community. Those classes include things such as coding, edible science, art, dance, cooking. And we had previously partnered with Excel for Youth the summer after the Tubbs fire, which was an incredibly difficult summer for our students as well. And we had a desire to really provide something enriching and very similarly this summer, we wanted to provide that same experience. This program is typically offered for a cost to families at Sonoma State. And so we are pleased to be able to bring it to our families at no cost to them, allowing families and students to sign up for 1 or 2 or maybe more classes, depending on the availability. This was a program that we did extend. In years past, we had offered it for 2 weeks. This year, we did work with Sonoma State to offer 3 weeks of programming, thus kind of providing longer, which was part of our goals this year.
I'll pick back up on high school credit recovery. Obviously, the identification of students and the offering of this portion of summer programming is to avoid that credit crunch, to make sure any student who is finding credit deficiency to be in the way of getting to a successful graduation and diploma has a means to ameliorate and address that, especially obviously for the graduating class of 2021. If you had a non-graduating senior, they were given highest priority as the opportunity to complete successfully, and then working consistently to invite students in grades matriculating from 12th grade down, so that you're kind of hitting the greatest credit need closest to graduation and then going from there. So let's spend a little time here because there's a lot involved in this. So when considering high school credit recovery and the program, please remember it was set up as a virtual setting because of the time that we were planning. There were still spacing requirements in place. And we were concerned that some of the academic disruption could be so great that we were seeing trends that concerned us that we did not want to have classes, stopped at 24 bodies in a room. We wanted to offer as much access as we could. So please do know, of course, in the future, should we all be so fortunate to be able to attend schooling in person and continue doing so, summer programs for credit recovery will also include that as a heavy component. But we didn't want to limit anything going into this summer. So credit recovery program facilitates credit recovery. And as can be seen, 537 courses were completed, which means that students took a course, completed the whole thing, received 5 credits for completion, which is why there was a total of 2,685 total credits recouped. All of those courses that were successfully completed get 5 credits, which add up to the total. So that's a great accrual for students over time that needed it. There were 2 sessions in credit recovery, session 1 and session 2, and any student at any point who ended near session 1 who still needed to continue was allowed to continue. And the beautiful thing about using a credit recovery thing through Cyber High is that students don't kind of hit an end where they're not successful. If a student is partway through a course, they can pick up at the beginning of this school year with that course and continue it, and therefore hopefully complete it. So for example, you could have a student in their 11th grade last year in summer school. They could have gone 3/4 of a way through a course. They haven't yet achieved the 5 credits. This year begins, credit recovery opportunities pick back up, and students after like 2 weeks of kind of downtime pick back up the course exactly where they left off and only must complete the quarter that's left to get the 5 credits for successful completion. And also we decided in this that there were some non-graduating seniors who were committed to working beyond the end of session 2. So session 1 was all of June, session 2 was all of July, and some students were like, I want to graduate, I'm almost there, I will continue working. So we had an administrator and some of the summer school staff continue to work with students from the end of session number 2 in July to the beginning of school in August. And students completed, as you can see, additional credits. And some students who were not able to graduate graduated because of that extension. So we really, truly extended credit recovery as deeply as we could into the summer to enable students to find success. So I'll add 1 or 2 more things and I'll kind of end. When students are kind of working through this and they're successfully completing credits and seeing progress, that gives you motivation going into the next year. So part of this is, it's not a one and done deal. That hope, that sense of rejuvenation continues into the summer programs, and credit recovery acts as one of those propellers, giving students an ability to see themselves as successful completers. They started summer maybe behind, but they leave on pace. And that changes how one sees themselves and their abilities to succeed. So it's about kind of giving that hope as well. Ms. Dillon, I think Acellus is next. So as part of credit recovery, there's actually an Acellus component, but the primary piece of Acellus is actually used for learning acceleration, and specifically, it's used in the area of mathematics. That's the one place where it's really honed in. And it's a limited experience with the credit recovery, but the other learning acceleration is much more open for students to take advantage of. And it's really about structuring an opportunity for rising 7th through 9th graders to kind of accelerate themselves into the next year and feel capable and competent with their math skills for what they'll encounter and what they'll grapple with intellectually. It allows students to reinforce skills, but it also helps them extend into what they will be doing, which is wonderful. And as always, it's since its inception, the Learning Acceleration Program has put an emphasis on helping rising 9th graders to be able to get elective credits if they successfully complete. So what an excellent thing. I'm getting enriched, I'm remediating a little bit, I'm preparing myself to move forward. I hit 9th grade, which is known as a transition year, and just like transition to college or any other environment, that can be kind of challenging. And wait, I've got 5 credits in my back pocket, already there. And I feel more enriched and ready to take on my academics and math. Win, win, win.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zolinardo. Santa Rosa has long had a relationship with land paths, one of our local environmental agencies. This has been through school programs during the school year, such as IUB, which stands for In Our Own Backyard. Many of our classrooms participate during the school year in these special programs. However, This year, we were really excited and so pleased to be able to partner with them for the summer as well. LandPass traditionally offers week-long camps for a fee to families. And this year we used Title I funds to provide this opportunity to students at our Title I schools. We were able to offer 4 one-week camps that were dedicated by LandPass specifically for the students of Santa Rosa City Schools at 2 locations in Sonoma County. I can tell you from having gone out to the camp at Occidental, and I know Superintendent Trunnell was also able to do so, the experience was unique and amazing for our students. The conversations that I had with students, listening to them share how good it was to be out there with their little brother or big sister, and how they had never been in such a beautiful place and had this opportunity to hike all day, was really showed just how important an opportunity like this was to add to our summer programming. We had some survey feedback. LandPass specifically has a survey that they fill out, which is extremely helpful. And feedback was, believe it or not, this is what it was: 100% of families agreed or strongly agreed that the camp had a positive impact on their child's social, emotional well-being. And in addition to that, 100% of families agreed or strongly agreed that their child expressed enthusiasm for attending camp each day, which is exactly what we want to hear. And I know the quotes are there on the slide, but I love the quote from Juan, age 11 here, who says, "My heart is sad because we have to leave." Now, we don't want Juan to be sad, but I think that is a true kind of testament to the power in this program itself. Another partnership that we continued this year is our partnership with Luther Burbank Center for the Arts. And it is through this partnership that we are able to offer the mariachi and the arts camp to our students. And students from the county are invited to attend, not just Santa Rosa City School students, but we did have a good number, 63 attend, which is about in line with a typical summer. What was wonderful this year is that they did offer both virtual and in-person, which I think was extremely important in a summer when not all families were ready to send their children back to in-person. So providing this virtual option through the Mariachi and Arts Camp was, I think, a positive thing for our summer program. And we are always grateful to continue to offer this program, because I know as a district, we support and understand the value that the arts provide to our students' lives. And so great, if I can, I will share it another time or with board members. We do have some wonderful video. We wanted to share video, but we know that there's limited time. And so we have some great video from the Mariachi and the Arts Camps that we can share with you separately if you'd like to see that at some point.
Great, thank you for your patience so far. And we will continue to share some more information with you for a few more minutes. So obviously part of Santa Rosa City Schools summer program is intended to disrupt kind of any systems of disenfranchisement for our students. So you'll notice that like LandPass was for Title I students. And you'll notice that like migrant education is explicitly, working to help support students who might be experiencing transitory educational experiences in previous years, or who may have had any challenges arise just due to having to kind of develop a second language while attending school. So migrant education is a part of our summer programming. It works with migrant and identified students, and they're young. They're usually in elementary grade. And the idea is to provide like a foundation and a basis for them moving forward. And this year there was kind of a focus on physical activity. The idea was that maybe there's been some stagnation just due to the pandemic, kind of more being homebound, and maybe having a little more stasis in their lives. And so we know young bodies, including those that are a little bit older, like to move. So we want to have students active and engaged. So learning through physical activity was an emphasis. At the same time, once again, that whole person approach, we wanted to support that kind of ability to express oneself physically and through movement. But then we also had a TOSA that worked with the program for that strong English language arts focus to support the academic angle, so that you get that whole experience for the student being able to move through. And of course, one of the focuses is being able to successfully speak, read, write academic English, so in the core classes of your elementary grade, students can successfully navigate. And that's one of the goals. Next is the Mike Hauser Academy. It's been something that we've been lucky to have a partnership with for a few years. And really what it says is this: learning should not be something that is not connected to real life, real context, experiential learning. So what Mike Hauser does is it invites students in. It tries to help rising ninth graders as they're kind of moving into high school look farther ahead towards the future by thinking about careers in our community and visiting local industry partners, seeing and being in real workspaces, and then applying STEM-based science, technology, engineering, and math learning and principles to actual fields and understanding how those connect. So students can begin to kind of see themselves in careers and begin to imagine themselves applying learning instead of just memorizing or regurgitating something. So there's a great quote on here from one of the students that came from some of the qualitative feedback we received, which I think encapsulates some of the beauty of the program. It was an amazing experience, the student says. The best parts of the program were the people around me and the daily learning about new careers I'd never thought about taking, but now consider them possible future careers. And once again, students here get elective credits coming into their high school years. So they're already kind of gaining some advantage as they enter in terms of the credit accrual. At the same time, have the passion and the lived experience of understanding learning in a real applied context.
Okay. Project Make. Project Make continues to be a program that we enjoy offering every year. It's typically been hosted at Comstock. Thank you, Comstock Middle School. Each year, it brings together a passionate group of educators who create fun, engaging learning environments for students to be creative and excited about learning. And each year, the offerings vary, but students have the opportunity to choose classes that they're most interested in. This year, there was a touch of Japan with some taiko drumming, culinary creations, rockets, knitting, comics, cartoon, all sorts of really fun, engaging, interesting things that the students had an opportunity to participate in. This is a relatively small program, but it is a program that we would like to continue to offer and hope to expand beyond its current capacity of about 100 students on any given year. Our site Jumpstarts. This was one of our new additions this summer. We were able to offer programs at 10 school sites. And so we had long kind of talked about providing Jumpstarts, and this seemed to be a great year to kind of give it a try. And the idea of offering a Jumpstart was to provide an opportunity for students to return to their school campuses closer to the start of the school year, to provide them some support in returning to campus in August. As the title says, simply giving them a jump start on the school year. While the structure and the theme of the schools was unique and at the site's discretion to kind of plan and create the program they were wanting to create for their students, each site did focus on creating learning experiences, academic and social, that would really work to welcome students back to campus, help them make connections with the adults and the peers that they would interact with when they came back to school in August, and give them that little boost, academic, socially, emotionally, ahead of the return to in-person. And so you can see that we offered programs all the way from elementary to high school in terms of our start. Santa Rosa City School Summer Camps. Our summer camps is a part of our district programming, which offers families, including those of our own district employees, to send their children to a summer camp program. It is a full day program, 8 to 4, and it's a fee for service program. However, many students attend on scholarships. And so students can attend this program all day and still be able to attend and take advantage of participation in some of our other programs. which is, I think, is especially important. The focus of this program is really to provide a safe, full day, engaging program that provides both kind of play, indoor, outdoor activities, coupled with some academic support as well.
Great. I know I'm supposed to dig into Alliance of the Redwoods, but if we were going to be at City Hall, I wanted to bring those taiko drummers in because they would literally shake your fingers and rattle your keys on your keyboard so you couldn't type an email. The principal, Andrea Correa, sent me a video of our students, and I had to stop what I was doing. I was working on planning for the next year, and it was, June, and it was just like, wow. The students walk up to the drums and they get the serious face. Amazing. So anyways, but Alliance of the Redwoods. We knew that with LandPaz, that was the idea to get students outdoors. We also thought we could partner with other agencies locally. Alliance of the Redwoods was one of them that was able to accommodate us, even though they were coming out of pandemic restrictions themselves. It kind of had the idea of getting students outdoors, socialization once again, and kind of social emotional wellness was a big idea of the component of it. We all know that being outside is just kind of refreshing in general, and doing things like challenge courses or learning something that requires coordination and teamwork, or pushing yourself physically while other students cheer you on is a wonderful part of that socialization and just kind of normalization. But then on the other hand, there was also like herpetology classes and learning about science and nature and close observation. So once again, it had that nice kind of academic and kind of social emotional appeal. But not every program, as we'll talk later, meets everything we hoped it would. Alliance on the Redwoods can be tricky. We tried to angle it mainly towards our high schoolers because we had other programs for younger students, but sometimes transportation, because it's kind of out there, could be a problem and a challenge. And I think that affected kind of who had access to it. But we did think it was necessary to open up more outdoor space experiences and to provide more access to those if we could, for students to experience structured learning and socialization that was healthy for them. Also, there's the Boys and Girls Club. I always love this picture. The last few days I've been looking at it. This young lady's kind of crawling under there, and that great little limbo moment. She's not quite doing the limbo, but she's doing a good job. And so we see our young students, we want them to be cared for, and we want them to be loved, and we want their families to be able to operate during the day sometimes. And the Boys and Girls Club kind of provides all of that. It's learning, it's summer camp, it's a chance to be engaged with peers. It serves multiple students, mainly our younger ones, and it happens at locations that we think are appropriate places for our students who might have transportation issues around the city to get to. And then, there's this great component that we added this year for more academic emphasis. Camp, fun, experiences, socialization, awesome, but we talked about the whole person. So that includes the academic in this case for this program. And that's where we later did Let's Go Learn, which had a daily component where students were doing academics on their core competencies to help them feel prepared for moving into this academic school year. So that was an important piece that we added. All right, that brings us to two slides that are going to go in tandem with each other. That's the next two. So as Ms. Dillon and I discussed, our job is not to bring you idealistic representations of our district that aren't real. It's to bring you real information and data for what we find out. And one of the requests last spring was that Ms. Dillon and I, and what was not then Ed Services, but what is now, bring some data that included qualitative as well as quantitative. We've included some of the quotes for the qualitative, but we did make sure that we surveyed and reached out to families post programs explicitly after our conversation in the spring to support our understanding as an institution. And of course, the reason why I started with we try to bring real information forward is we would love these percentages to be 100%. There's not a day that I left this office where Kelly Dillon is here and the lights are out because it's dark and she's working in her office on summer school that she doesn't want it to be 100% effective. That's her commitment to our community. That she goes home late to her own family for that. But there was some information from families that, look, it could have been maybe better, it could have been richer, it could have been more of what we wanted. And so I'm going to contextualize this a little bit with bringing in some of what Ms. Dillon and I have looked at for the qualitative feedback. Families didn't say we didn't like what you provided. What they said is we wish it were longer in terms of hours of the day. We wish there were transportation so students could get every single program. We wish the programs didn't conflict with each other, so 2 enriching programs happened at the same time, at the same dates. Those are the kind of feedback that we saw in the qualitative to feed into what the percentages meant. They weren't comments that said, don't offer this program, or that program just didn't work at all, or we would never take that. And in conjunction with that, Ms. Dillon, if you don't mind sharing the next one, what kind of hammers that home is that families, by almost 90%, I'm going to give me the point too, by 90% said, yes, we would do this program again with our student, our child, and our family. And once again, let me be clear, the kind of feedback we received was, could the program be longer in the day? Could the program be longer overall? Could it not conflict with another program at the same time? Could transportation be in place? And Ms. Dillon will speak to some of our thinkings about implications down the road based on that. But families by and large were like, thank you, that was great. And could it have been maybe even more? Where we thought we planned more and deeper, that was still some feedback we received.
Thank you. So we might think that summer just ended and we wouldn't even be thinking about next summer, but that is not the way this works. We know that as soon as one summer ends, we do need to start thinking about the next summer. And in fact, to have a summer that is well-staffed, well-planned, well-organized, we know that starting that planning early, and as we show here in the fall, really, is necessary. So you'll see here just some steps. These are just some of the things along the way, just a very few that have to be thought of and considered. And so as you see, we want to further analyze and kind of synthesize the data. We've shared kind of percentages, some qualitative, some quotes, and we do have some information, but we want to kind of keep digging, keep looking at it, keep seeing if we can, what we can gather from it, to kind of determine what programs to offer, when to offer, and to whom to offer programs next year. And so we have to think about some things. Who attended the programs? Which programs were at capacity and could have been expanded if space and staffing were available? What spaces do we have? What staffing do we have? Have we identified specific academic needs? What are we seeing amongst our students now in terms of their social and emotional needs? And what partnerships may we be able to continue next year because we want to and because they also want to and are available? As Tim mentioned, we have really kind of highlighted transportation perhaps as something that we really need to dig a little deeper in. Programs in which transportation is offered are often at max capacity, whereas programs perhaps where that is not offered are not. And that is understandably makes sense when programs go from maybe 8 to 1, and a parent would have a difficult time perhaps picking up their child at 1 o'clock if they're working from 8 to 5 or 8 to 6, or if not longer. And so one of the things we would like to do is to kind of be thinking about in looking at our budget and our ability to provide transportation, which is reliant on a number of factors, budget, as well as the ability of a transportation company to actually provide that and meet that needs. However, we do think it's worth digging into and have considered it may mean fewer programs, perhaps, but maybe programs that are at higher capacity in terms of serving more students because more students can get there. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about as we start planning for next year. And we would, in closing, I would like to say something. You know, when we think about feedback, you know, we've got survey data, we've got attendance data, we've got some of this, these quotes. I am a firm believer myself, I'll speak for myself only, that when assessing our impact on students in the classroom and the impact of our programs and understanding if we've met the mark per se, I think hearing from the students we serve is probably most critical. how do they feel about the experience they had? What did they learn? What did they come away with? And how well did we help them feel better prepared for next year? So I'd like to close with a statement from one of our students. This is a student who attended one of our Jumpstart programs. And in a letter that he was asked to write about kind of what his goals were for this year and how he was feeling, this is what he said. Learning during COVID is one of the most mentally draining, derailing things ever. Mainly because if it gets tough, there's no friend to turn to. Distance learning has made me so socially awkward. And now because of that, I need to learn how to talk to peers again. That's actually why I came to Jumpstart, not because I'm having any issues. And it's just been to reconnect, and it helped me a lot. So with that, I would just close and say we are grateful that this student was open in sharing with us and that we could provide a space in place for him and many other students to feel better prepared for this school year. And we just want to publicly thank everyone, parents, community members, staff, classified, certificated management, everyone who participated in creating this very robust, full summer program that we were able to offer this summer. And so with that,
may I add one thing?
Of course.
Thank you. So do remember that we provided school-based therapists and mental health counseling. All administrators were aware of this, and that was part of our component for the whole child focus and priority 2 that this board has said. And we were committed to that. We know that those were used, and Eric Lofchi and his team were there to support students who needed it. And that was one of the trickiest things for us in preparing for summer 2021. And I'll end with this. You could have a student academically doing fairly well, but in heavy depression due to the pandemic and its isolation. And the programs and the scope and the depth tried to allow multiple avenues to capture the easily seen and the not so easily seen effects on learning and socialization from the pandemic to support our families and students. And we endeavored to do so. We wouldn't claim we were perfect, but we appreciate the board support in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you,
We turn it back to you.
Thank you, executive directors and your team, the teachers, the office staff to put it all together for kids. Board members, what questions do you have? Clerk Flores. Then Omar Medina.
I'm already unmuted. Didn't even realize that. Okay, so thank you for the for your report. As always, you both are very thorough, and I appreciate that. I'm glad that students had both an academic and enrichment opportunities this summer. Something that might help me personally is having data, multi-year data as to how students have done in the past. Percentages of students who actually attended, especially, secondary level at the credit recovery level, and how many students actually, went to summer school and did credit recovery, and how many students, and the percentage of those that passed. The numbers were pretty impressive, right? You reported that there were 537 courses completed, but having that percentage will be really, really helpful. And then compare that with past years to see what sort of things we can improve on, and so forth. And the question regarding students, the term students served, I'm just not quite sure as to what that means. If a kid showed up for like, I don't know, a couple of days, the whole summer, could you just explain to me what that term means? That's my question. And then I already told you my comments. So okay.
Ms. Dillon?
Sorry, can you repeat?
So I think it was in slide 3.
Okay.
First ones.
Yeah. How many students were served, right? I just don't know.
Oh, okay. My apologies. So that number is pulled off of reports from the programs. So it could be that it doesn't take into account if a student attended for a few days and then didn't finish. Those aren't necessarily students who completed a full program. And it doesn't necessarily take into account a student who maybe attended more programs. So I do think one of the things that we have reflected on, Mr. Zolinardo and myself, is not all of our programs take attendance in our attendance system. Some do, and we create class lists in that way, and it's very easy to track data that way. Some do not. And so we are looking at how do we make that a more standardized process so that when we get to kind of looking at the data and reporting, it's much easier to pull data. I can tell you we were crunching a lot of numbers in student IDs and things like that because they were not in the system, and hand crunching that. So I think there's some work for us to do there to maybe have a clearer picture of, exactly did all of those students perhaps attend a full program. And so.
And I'll add one small detail. The students served, that means the total number, is in equal comparison to previous years in the sense of that also didn't take into account if they went for 3 days and stopped. But yeah, with the student information system transitioning from Illuminate to Aries, and actually kind of that transition being fairly significant, that was part of it. But also I think Ms. Dillon's correct. It hasn't been the practice that every program uses the student information system, which causes us to have to gather data in a much more manual process and not have ease of facility with it. So.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you. And then as a board member, that's the sort of information that I'll be looking for in the future, just to compare apples to apples. But thank you to both of you for your presentation.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Was it Director Medina next?
Yeah, so first off, again, thank you for the presentation. Lovely presentation, loved it. Really liked the Jumpstart program. That seemed pretty cool. I loved all the programs. I really liked the increase up to 24 programs. I think that's amazing. Applaud all the work of everybody that just participated in making this happen. I really love Land Pass, Alliance, Redwoods, anything that's outdoors. I think now, especially to me, that's really important, not just because I feel it's good for students, but in the context of climate change and appreciating nature and our planet. I think it's really important to build that up. And if we could do it more often, not just in the summer somehow, I'd love to see more programs that do that. In terms of, I think it was slide number 7 on the credit recovery, I was curious on the, there was 54 students that passed the 1P to the second semester to be able to enter 2P. I'm wondering, like 54 out of like how many attempted? Do we have that figure?
Great question. So you're referring to, I just want to make sure I'm on the same slide with you. So you want to quote that again for me or state that again?
Yeah, I talked about the 54 students and the credit recovery. I think it was a slide 7. Yeah, 54 students in grades 9 to 11 that recovered second semester math 1P credits in order to progress to 2P. I'm wondering how many were in the situation where they needed to recover that actually passed. So 54 recovered, how many didn't?
Yeah.
If that's a figure.
Great question. I went to the slide. Thank you for just kind of reorienting me because I was at the end of it. So yeah, I know that we can take our overall numbers, Trustee Medina, and we could go ahead and we could look at the kind of failure or struggle rates of math. But that is a good question. I don't think we put that in the context of how many totally. So that might be something that's valuable for us to think about. I mean, it is something we're tracking during the year as an understanding of how we're doing in math. But I don't know if we put in the context here of that. That's a good follow-up question.
And I think also just in the context of what, even before COVID, math has been an issue, but in terms of like what's working and what's not, if this is working well, how can we maybe expand or build upon it if it's working? Just looking at all this, like the idea of all these programs, I think are motivating and inspiring to kids. I think about like around school, what can we do to have more programs like this available to students constantly? I was interested in, it was such a big growth in programs in terms of like overall costs, funding and the future, sustaining this number of programs. Is there like work being done with grant writing or other things to build upon or continue to fund this. I'm not sure if we had special funding for some of these programs that might have been one time, or if you could speak on any of that.
I can say that we typically budget every year in the LCAP to support a pretty, what you see in 2019 in terms of number is LCAP funded summer programming. It's been kind of attended to in that way. And through a combination of LCAP, migrant ed funding, perhaps title funding. This year we did have the ability to use the extended learning monies. And so that did allow us to provide a more robust, and it did help us expand the program financially. So we have not yet looked into grants or other funding sources but I think that that's definitely something to consider for sure.
And I would add that in previous years, and even we spoke to it last year, it's been a robust part of Santa Rosa City Schools to offer a very strong summer program. Some districts offer little to nothing sometimes, depending on how they allocate their budgets and plan. If there are, and we know there likely will be, future kind of fiscal tightening, it's going to have to be a concerted effort to keep in our purview what we want to hold up as enriching and valuable. And summer programming, or some parts of it, are an important piece as you're identifying of the puzzle. I don't know if Mr. Edson wanted to add anything from his particular purview and oversight, because he's obviously more detailed there, but I'll turn it over at this point. If he doesn't, we'll keep going.
I'm going to call on Director De La Cruz.
Well, can I just finish one last point?
Omar, we're doing questions right now. So is this a question, and you have 2 questions?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just a question. Sorry.
Okay, so we're going to come back to you.
Well, okay.
Director De La Cruz.
Thanks, President Fong. A few questions. I was curious if you surveyed families around how they found out about the programs, like what outreach worked, right? And how do we know that it worked, right? And I think that were there certain platforms that were easier for parents to navigate than others, and how can we work with our community partners to kind of help them also to learn about what works to get kids into those programs.
Great question. No, we did not include that as a question in the survey, and I think that would have been a good one. So thank you. We do know, I do know that there was kind of a variety of ways, because we were not in person or not fully in person at that time when students were being enrolled, a lot of the communication was via Parent Square, electronic, Google Forms, things like that. And in many cases that then required kind of that follow-up phone call. I can tell you that Land Paths called every single family and enrolled them, so and I know that with our KA6 Academy that there's a lot of personal phone calls, migrant education, personal things mailed, phone calls. So I think we know that probably a phone call home and a direct contact and conversation with family is like the number one. But that is a great question to add to future surveys. I appreciate that suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks. My other question was, and I'm sorry, I took a bio break in the middle of the presentation, sadly, but I wondered if you had presented information on the demographic of kids who attended.
We didn't present that publicly. We included the demographic data as an attachment in the board agenda item.
Okay, thanks. Yep. I'll look for it there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, sorry?
The data is pretty extensive.
So again, just adding my voice of thanks and lots of gratitude for, both the kind of combination of learning and social emotional support that comes with these programs, especially in such a critical time, and especially love all the outdoor stuff. Go Land Paths.
Director Sheffield.
Thank you for the presentation. And I heard from some parents throughout the summer and even some school staff about these opportunities, the academic, the creative, physical, outdoors, nature, and how they really did change the lives, and that was in the testimonial. So I appreciate Director De La Cruz asking the question about outreach, And I assume that the demand for these programs were pretty high. But I'm wondering who were the unfortunate students who were turned away because of lack of space. And then in the future, how can we capture or include these students?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I believe really at the core that we did not have to turn too many students away. I know that for land paths, we were limited to their capacity and their ability. And I will also note that many of these programs may have had a larger capacity in years past, but we were attending to small class sizes because of the pandemic and trying to keep classes small. So whereas typically land paths would have 4 groups of 12, so 48 students a week, they were doing 3 groups of 12 or 4. So some of our capacity was related to the pandemic and just keeping groups small. I can tell you that in the KA6 Academy, that was a very full program. That is one of the programs that our students get personal invites and we provide transportation for. And so I can tell you that was one of the indicators for us of why transportation may be an important component going forward, because those 2 programs, land paths and the academy, both had transportation and they were full. So I think that is perhaps kind of an indicator for us that when transportation is available, if available, programs will fill up because families will take advantage of that as a very helpful component.
Yeah, and maybe my second question has to do with, transportation, and one of the slides had talked about partnerships in the community. So looking ahead to next summer, and as we're exploring all of these possibilities, what maybe is the number one thing that we can do as a district to prioritize or budget for doing these summer programs every summer the way that we did it this summer?
It's a good question, Trustee Sheffield. And one of the complications I'm going to add to your first question. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that you heard qualitative feedback that the programs are meaningful. I love my kids. I go home late many times and I don't see them. And I'm glad to know that all of our kids that I love just as much are impacted in positive ways. It hardens me to spend that time. And that helps to hear. So access to programs and kind of attendance in them. I was going to add one nuance and then come back to your second part here. Just like for credit recovery, there tends to be a funneling there. We don't typically get as much exposure for students in 9th grade and in 10th grade as we do for the upper grade levels by how we prioritize. And typically staffing can sometimes limit what we can offer. Sometimes we can't just hire enough staffing. Another thing that was interesting to me was when we kind of looked at things, Ms. Dillon and I were thinking about, there's a complication with attendance in July. You come out of the school year, it's June, there's a lot of interest in programs and kind of being engaged. And then as you get into July, which is totally natural, human beings, families need a break. And so we might need to be strategic. It was great that we offered things that kind of scope such a large period of time, but I do know that July can create complications for attendance. So that's
a good observation.
Mm-hmm. And then I was going to go to your second part, but I forgot it. What was that second question?
Second part was prioritizing or budgeting for programs
of the scope every year. Yeah, I mean, that's a complicated response potentially, but I think the easiest way to boil it down is and I see Mr. Edson's hands up, so I'll pause.
Thanks, Tim. A couple of points, Director Sheffield and the rest of the board. The ELO monies, the extended learning opportunity monies that were granted to us under COVID, right, for purposes of running a school district, included earmarked monies for the summer of 21, as well as carry forward to the summer of 22. So important to note there. And that's the work that we'll be doing this fall with both Kelly, Tim, Dr. Armstrong, the entire staff, is how do we budget what's left of that money that was earmarked specifically for summer opportunities that included enrichment, right? That we heard a lot about tonight. It's not the normal for summer school, right? We're using summer school primarily for other reasons based on available funding, most of which is credit recovery as we go through this. So part of this is where the uniqueness of the situation of COVID and the additional funding that carried forward beyond the summer of 22, right? Then we'll have to look at other ways to facilitate this through a budget that may not have earmarked money for summer, that doesn't take away from our traditional school year and the programs and services that we want to offer there. So that'll be the work that started for 22 this fall, not only with program offerings and what could be, but then looking at sustainability beyond that and what it will take in order to offer something more than traditional summer school that we've known for, the last decade plus in public education. So that's a short answer for that, to address Director Medina as well about funding.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, just wonderful programs. Love the presentation as well. We're doing it for all the right reasons. Thank you.
I had a question. The kids who went to Jump Start, were they invited particularly, or anybody got to go? Yes.
Primarily invited, yes.
Okay.
It depends on the site. Some sites put out kind of a, here's our program, let us know if you're interested. Some sites were strategic in looking at students that might benefit from it. It was probably a mix, quite frankly.
Yeah, and some fit a particular niche, President Fong. So for example, you might have like a culinary offering. And so students who are more interested in that endeavor kind of are more likely to be kind of invited and go because of staffing that was willing to do and take part.
All right, so Deputy Superintendent Edson, the monies that were also for the summer of 22, is that money we've already received and we've had to steward it, or do we get new monies?
That would be the monies that we've received under the ELO grant.
Okay, okay. All right, this is a, any other board member questions? Oh, Director Medina.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow back up on, I believe it was Dr. Flores's question on what students served mean, but just in terms of future collection of data, if we can not only like maybe collect like attendance data, but also like what's the cost per student for each program, maybe the program cost per day of activity. I imagine each program is different amount of days. And if we start collecting like participation data, what's the program cost per day of participation to see which ones are more effective? I'm really interested in seeing if we're having issues with transportation or other things, which programs have more obstacles, but that type of data. And also as funding changes, maybe percentage of like maybe district money versus private money in terms of funding programs. And if I guess my question is, in contracts, once we develop like this data that we maybe want programs to collect, can we include that in any agreements with any third parties that we enter contracts or agreements with?
Okay. Public comment time.
If there are any
On summer
members of
school.
if there are any members of the public who are students who would like to comment on E3, the summer school item, please raise your hand. Students first, please. And now we'll open it to any members of the public who would like to comment on item E3. This is the time to raise your hand by pushing the raise hand button. And Robert Johns will comment.
Hi, my name is Robert Johns. I'm a preschool psychologist in the district. The purpose of extended school year was misstated. It's not necessarily meant to provide extra time to meet IEP goals. Those goals are still meant to be met within the academic year. However, it's meant to prevent the regression on those goals following a typically scheduled school break. It is a regular summer program, and I just want to make sure we're not framing extended school year as a program that was meant to remedy learning loss caused by COVID. The students who qualified for extended school year already had a history of regression following even short holiday breaks. And I just want to encourage us to think about how much regression occurred for those students after a whole year. So I'm just curious what we're going to be doing next summer, and I'm really hoping that it's more than the bare minimum that they're already entitled to. Thanks.
Thank you. President Fong, there are no other hands raised.
I am going to make a comment that the way we spend our money is what we value. And so we were privileged enough to be able to add dollars to what we usually do, and to the concept of learning loss and regression. It's all there, but we have to make really tough decisions about, where we spend our scarce dollars. So I am really thankful for the summer school program and for the work that went into it and the people who were creating all of it. Thank you. Any other discussion, board? And this is a discussion item only, so any other discussion? Okay, got it. Thank you so much, executive directors, Zelenardo and Dylan. Good job. We're moving on to item E4. This is also a discussion item on the individualized graduation plan, IGP report for 2021.
Thank you, Board President Fong. And this report is a response to a request from the board to provide information at a future board meeting regarding the IGP data. And so I am going to hand it over to Dr. Armstrong and Mr. Zelenardo.
Thank you, Superintendent Trinnell. We already have Executive Director Zelenardo in the space, so I will just turn it straight over to him. And also, I would like to say that this is a conversation about priority 5, equity and excellence, and also to add that we have at minimum 720 days to support our youth through graduation with earning credits. And so I'm excited for Zelenardo to have this opportunity to present on the plan that he led last year and future year. Thank you.
Well, good evening again. So let me go to my share screen function and bring up and have it ready. Before I go into just a few slides, I've trimmed it down, so I'm just trying to be mindful of time. So while we're in here, I'm kind of editing and kind of be mindful. I want to say, first of all, humbly, I may have led the endeavor in terms of helping from a central district office focus, but multiple minds and many individuals in Santa Rosa City Schools helped engender the idea. And it wasn't per se me. And it had to take support from our school sites, our counseling staff, our families wanting it to percolate and become a reality for cabinet and the Board of Education ultimately to support. And I'd like to point out, and I'll do this again at the end, that what Santa Rosa City Schools instituted as the individualized graduation plan has become enshrined as law in State Assembly Bill 104 by allowing students to reach the minimum California courses and then in our system credits to graduate the high school diploma. So stop the bus for a sec. Let's repeat that. Santa Rosa City Schools had an innovation as an intervention, the individualized graduation plan supported through our whole system, including this Board of Education, that has been replicated accidentally, I think, by our California Assembly in AB 104, saying that students who were in 11th grade last year or 12th grade last year could complete with the state minimum. So that's really key to me about innovation, commitment. I know President Fong often says, what can schools do to be different? We were forced into a different environment and we answered in a different way collectively that I think gave families hope and purpose. And it's not all perfect, which I'll get into the challenges as well. So thanks for that opening, that entree, and we shall begin now. I'll bring up the screen for you. So the individualized education graduation plan, just a reminder, like, well, please remind me, or maybe I'm listening tonight and I don't remember. So simply, students were reporting academic disruption. We were noticing it in data for our schools. And also students were reporting a strong sense of unease and anxiety. Now, from priority 2, we know that if you're looking at the whole person, if I'm anxious, I'm worried, I'm fretful, it's going to impact my ability to extend my academic focus, because that critical kind of conscious application of intellect resides on a foundation of well-being, physical, spiritual, emotional. And so students were reporting this to us, including the U-Truth survey as a reminder. I think we were up in 70% of students saying they were feeling kind of hopeless about the future and anxious about it. That was a concerning statistic, I think, for everybody. So out of that, the individual graduation plan kind of emerged. And it was supposed to be flexible, and it was supposed to be individualized. So a student could plan out courses and credit completion to reach a high school diploma before the end of June 2021. It did allow students to graduate with less than the 220 credit local requirement that Santa Rosa City Schools normally maintains. And it allowed students to go all the way down to the state minimum. It also had checkpoints to try to push students to achieve a credit total that would allow them, by course completion, to be transferable to a UC or CSU. It wasn't like we just went to the lowest level. We would try to convince students to push themselves to achieve as much as they could. It was implemented as an intervention that tried to be commensurate in the scope of the disruption of COVID-19 to learning in schools. And we know the disruption was tectonic. It shook the foundations of how we experience school, and the response with what I will now call the IGP, Individualized Graduation Plan, was supposed to be equal in weight and measure to that. And it did live up to the board priority 4, which speaks to creating flexible learning environments by allowing students to pursue successful paths towards graduation through different means. So that's kind of what it was, just as a reminder. So let's start with some challenges, because I could end there, say, oh, we had an innovative solution, people cared, we came up with these as a response, and leave it as a feel good and say goodnight, but that wouldn't be accurate to the endeavor to speak truthfully about what we're seeing. So the IGP last year did have some places it wasn't as successful as Santa Rosa City Schools wanted it to be. Over 11% of our seniors eligible for it did not pursue that as an option. Now, a portion of those students, a small portion, said, no, I want to go for 220. I'm not going to go for anything less. So some of those were just straight out denials. No, thank you. We appreciate the support, but we're going to increase credit recovery or go to summer school or do something else. But it does mean that a portion of our seniors basically were not on track to graduate, and the IGP didn't fix that. With the IGP, remote learning didn't change. So I could meet with my counselor, I could map out my individualized plan for graduation. And when I woke up the next morning, as Trustee Sheffield so accurately described, all the pressures in the household were still there. I might be still educating a sibling. I might be still dealing with juggling work and life from home around my parents. I might be helping financially, and remote learning continued. Some things that weren't triggering positive learning for me, or maybe wasn't making me engaged, they were there the next day and the next day and the next day as well. We know that contact and family outreach was complicated. It was by the best endeavors of all parties. Sometimes families moved. Sometimes utilities were closed off. Sometimes work priorities caused there not to be a response. So those things, those pressures did not automatically go away. Other challenges that we continued to face. Course completion, credit accrual still needed to be done. So maybe I made a plan with my counselor, and then all of a sudden I found that there was a little bit of a barrier because I still had to actually successfully complete. Pandemic was continuous disruption, and the IGP, as innovative as it was, wasn't introduced, and this is a key point, until January of 2021, meaning a whole semester had gone by. The successes that were there, 88% of the seniors who were eligible for an IGP chose that option, worked with counselors, identified that as what they wanted to do. There were students who were not on track for graduation at that time when they accepted that option. Over 75% of students who likely would not have graduated did complete successfully and graduated Santa Rosa City Schools. Students who were behind got a chance to catch up and feel hope and see a resurgence of opportunity. We know that non-required classes and credits were replaced with what was absolutely needed in some cases, which kept students moving. It increased contact with families, and during the time of isolation, that was a positive, a net positive. And struggling seniors were given probably more attention than we try to give them total attention every year, but maybe more attention than previously. And there were some learnings to take away from it, some implications that are long lasting. These ones will not surprise you. Students find hope in having alternative pathways to graduation. Hope is a key ingredient for all of us to continue in the face of perseverance, which COVID-19 might be considered one. Interventions have to be flexible. Students need more contact, not less. And you have to keep students engaged from day one of school. So that has led kind of to where we are and reflecting on the data and the stats. We see that students who have had complications with schooling, who become disengaged, lose a sense of academic identity, whether it be because they fall into credit recovery early on, or because in this case, specifically the pandemic, they tend to kind of be harder to reach, harder to motivate, harder to re-engage. So the State Assembly has said with AB 104, students can meet the state minimum and graduate. Santa Rosa City Schools has endeavored to create an IGP 2.0 process just to help our sites move through it in a very logical order and to make sure that we have a systematic response. So we're going to revise that IGP 2.0, and counselors are already working with students on that. The origin of the IGP was extremely innovative, and it kind of was what we see replicated across the state. But ultimately, a really key learning, when you look at the data when it was connected to this board report, we included demographics all year last year from January on. We added for graduates for you and attached that to the board report. But one of the things you'll notice that students who didn't finish, that gap between August and January, where the IGP really became a reality, was a significant extended period of time, especially in a pandemic isolated at home. The key is here, AB 104 exists, but even better yet, Santa Rosa City Schools is implementing it now with students today. They don't need to wait until January 2022 to see a successful pathway to graduation if their credit levels and their courses forbid them from graduating on time. We can build the plan so they understand the whole year from day one, which allows much more continuity and belief that they can successfully complete. And that buoys my faith and my hope that we'll see less of an impact for students who are behind than we did last year. At this point, that kind of wraps up my brief summary, keeping my eye on time, but also trying to speak to some of the nuances of the individualized graduation plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep, and I'll stop the share. Give me just a sec. Thank you.
The reminder that we kind of laid this out before the state did was just very cool. Very cool. I really like how this is really fitting our mission vision. Board members, what questions do you have for Mr. Zolinardo? Let's start with Clerk Flores.
The only one raising my hand. Okay, so thank you once again. Let's see, I have, I think you and Dr. Armstrong already answered this previously in another board agenda item. Looking at the numbers, we have 506 who qualified and 339 that completed it. That leaves about 167 non-grads or seniors who are eligible for that fifth year ability to come back, right, due to AB 104. Thank you for including that. So in your presentation, you mentioned that they were contacted and you're doing an extra layer of contact to make sure that these students are able to attend. Okay, so school started already. So how are we going to integrate these students who are thinking of coming back a fifth year? That's my question.
Dr. Armstrong, do you want me to begin? Great question, Trustee Flores, and complicated. So yeah, the first initial reach out is not enough. We believe from what we've learned, I think spoken to earlier, that individual contact is even more important in person. So one way is in traditional independent study, not in connection to AB 130. Okay. In traditional independent study, students who are fifth year senior and don't need a full complete load of courses will sometimes complete through that avenue. And we have students currently doing that. And those students will likely be able to complete before the semester ends. So it doesn't feel like they're committing to this kind of more than they need. So that's one avenue to integrate them in. Some students will need more of a full course, but potentially the semester could be the end. So, being able to graduate early is possible. And lastly, Ridgeway High School does have open seats, and that is a place that can facilitate quicker credit recovery and can facilitate getting a student to completion earlier and exiting earlier. So those are some of the things we have in place, and hopefully our contact with families will continue to help those students matriculate back to us if they need it, and we can help them successfully complete. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you.
I see no other hands up for questions. We are going to move to public comment.
If there are any students who would like to comment on item E4, please raise your hand at this time. Students first. And seeing no students, anyone else would like to comment on item E4, please raise your hand at this time. And Maura Donahue would like to comment.
Hello. Thank you for this topic and for all of your work and for taking my comment. I would just really like to know what extra supports and interventions can be implemented, that you mentioned that could be implemented for students who, for various reasons, pandemic and distance learning included, are completely shut down and unable to access any learning. I have a 20-year-old daughter who is a super senior. She's in special education, but is quite gifted intellectually. She experienced some abuse and discrimination in 8th grade and has never really been able to heal from that. And it seems like whatever supports or interventions we try, she's always just missing the boat on anything that has been able to crack that shell and heal her. She wanted to be a PhD, in, I don't see the timeline, I don't see the clock, but I don't know where my time is, but
40 seconds.
Thank you. She was straight A's and B's in 7th grade, tried to kill herself at school in 8th grade, then got shunned and bullied and harassed by her teacher, and the principal wouldn't speak with me. No one all the way up to superintendent at the time would speak with me about this. And she is still in suffering. And it just feels like I'm so grateful for these programs that you offer, but she never seems to be able to benefit from them because at this point, she's 20. She wants to move on with her life. But is there any chance she'll ever be able to access education in a formal institution in the future? She doesn't trust that she won't be harmed again. And I know this is a little
Ms. Donahue, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for your comment, but time is up. But we do have the ability, if you want to email, to continue with your comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And it looks like there are no other hands raised.
It is very sad. I know that we continue to do all that we can, special ed up until age 22, and that I know also that the junior college has a very strong program for special ed also. But it's very difficult sometimes to find the right fit. Board members, any other discussion on this? We're good. Director McCormick.
First of all, I just want to make sure and see if we can reach out to our last speaker and just follow up, see what the situation is, see if we can help. And then aside from that, I just want to comment that I actually am working with a student at the JC right now that actually went through this program this year, and it worked really great for her, and it gave her just the room, the opportunity, and the access to kind of get through it in a really tough situation. And she did successfully, and now she's kind of launching her next steps at the junior college. And it's just been exciting to have. I mean, I didn't have any idea that she had gone through the program, and she had talked to me about it. And because I knew she went to Santa Rosa City High School, and it was great to have her just kind of volunteer the information and talk about the program and how it worked for her and what opportunities it created for her. So it was just fun to interact with someone personally on that level. And I just wanted to let you know that it really made a difference in her life. So and it sounds like our percentages looked pretty good. So and again, I hope we can move forward with more innovation like this to help these kids, because this is not this is going to be an issue. I mean, just graduation is always an issue. But in these years and these few years coming out of this, it's just going to be hard. So yeah, so thank you for your work on that and for the report.
I want to thank our counselors, who I think are doing the Herculean effort to get every single kid, and they know their kids well. I know they do. Right, Director Flores? All right, we are moving on. I see no other hands up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Executive Director Tim Zolinardo. E5 is an action item, approval of the revisions to the adopted Santa Rosa City Schools LCAP.
Thank you, Board President Fong, members of the board, and our community that's still with us tonight. We bring to you this evening some revisions to the LCAP that was presented and approved by the board in June of this year. There are specificities in this report tonight that lend themselves to information that was not included in the June LCAP report. And Dr. Armstrong is going to go through those. I just want to recognize the collaborative effort in conjunction with our Sonoma County Office of Education, who worked with us to identify additional steps that needed to be included that were initially not a part of the June report. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Superintendent Trinnell. We are adding 7 actions to goal 3. And if you're following along with the attachment in the board packet, that is page 133 of 168. So goal 3, action 18 is the first edition. And that's the KA through 6 music program, with the goal of creating cultural connections for students who are identified as English learners, foster youth, and low income by providing the ongoing music education that includes instruction and or an instrument or instrumentals each week. The second addition was action number 19, and that is kindergarten childcare and classified support. And that is the ongoing supervision of Kinder Academy and Kinder students at the end of the school day, as well as students grades 1st through 6. The third one was English learner classroom support. And the goal there is to provide targeted small group instruction to support students who are in the EL program and are identified through district-wide benchmarks, screening, and other classroom-based assessments. The next addition is Action 21, and that's targeted support for elementary school students. And that is made possible through instructional assistants who, again, target small group instructional support. And that's identified through diagnostic testing, which of course they help with. And these are for students who are identified as English learners, foster youth, and low income. Action 22, provide additional support for Kinder Academy, Kinder combo classes, and or other regional Kinder Academy classrooms. And so that provides for us to budget for 3 7-hour instructional assistants to support the programs. The next one is Action 23, alternative educational opportunities. And this is to provide alternative ed opportunities for tier 2 and 3 students. And it also supports 9th grade transition. And then the last addition is Action 25, alternative education leadership. We are in the process of identifying needs and developing a robust professional development plan to support leaders as well as alternative education opportunities for students who are in need of more targeted support, being preventative before getting to some of those intervention steps. And those are the 7 additions for the 21-22 LCAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. I just want to signal the lift that it was for multiple departments, including educational services and our business services and fiscal services teams, and our data teams as well. Multiple hours, multiple weeks, starting in July, working through August, to ensure that we are capturing the information clearly and down to the cent. So I just want to make sure I mention that and give just a strong kudos to the team who worked tirelessly to ensure that we had the appropriate information in this report. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Board President Fong.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Board member questions. Director Flores.
I don't know if this is a complicated question or not, but I mean, could you explain the funding sources again, and then how is that going to affect our current budget, right? Because it looks like, it looks like a few items, and some of these items are pretty, hefty, right? 638,000 for the K6 music program, so on and so forth. So where is it coming from? Where's the money coming from? And was it not included before in the LCAP? And can you just explain a little bit about the whole funding process of these 7 items? Thank you.
Absolutely. Trustee Flores, the LCAP previously did not account for those expenditures. And so the revision was adding the actions and then also adding in the identified funding source to match. So it's not a new budgeted item that was created for the purpose of this LCAP. It was more making sure that we had the goal in place to match the funds that were already allocated for the programs. And it's making sure that they're aligned.
Okay, thank you. So there was a mismatch in funding sources when this was audited. That's what I'm hearing, right? And that's probably how you caught this.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say mismatched. I would just say that with the LCAP, there is a section where we have the opportunity to talk about the funds that we use for specific populations. So that's the foster youth, English learners, and low-income populations. In the first draft of the LCAP, our consolidated services did not include all of the funds that it could have included. And so we wanted to make sure that all of the funds that we spend in support of students were reflected in the LCAP. So it was more of an update to show the allocations.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up, we will take public comment on this agenda item, E5.
So if there are any students in the audience that'd like to make public comment on E5, please raise your hand. And now just anyone open to the general public for comment on item E5. Raise your hand at this time. And there are no hands raised.
Any other comments, board? And this is an action item.
I'd like to move to approve the revisions to the LCAP.
Second.
All right, so moved by Director De La Cruz, seconded by Director McCormick.
Director Beard.
Aye.
Thank you. Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. Thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Superintendent Trinnell, congratulations.
Thank you so much, board.
Item E6 is an action item on the 2020-21 unaudited actuals.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are bringing this report forward to you, and I will hand it over to Deputy Superintendent Edson and Joel Dantos, our Executive Director.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'll wait for Joel to join us. There he is. Good evening. Tonight we are bringing to you the unaudited actuals for the 2020-21 school year. They are due by September 15th to the County Office of Education. If you'll recall, in the budget adoption in June, we brought estimated actuals with the approved budget for 21-22, including information about our two out years, 22-23 and 23-24. With that, we go through the governor's budget adoption sometime in June and early July. We come back in August with the 45-day budget revision, which we did at our first board meeting in August. And that culminates, this will be the last step before we close out the 2021 fiscal year with unaudited actuals, which will now go through the audit process with our selected auditor for submission by December 15th of this year, which will then finalize the 2021 school year. With that, I will hand it over to Executive Director Joel Dantos to discuss highlights, if you will, of the unaudited package that was presented in the board packet that upon approval tonight we'll be submitting to SCO tomorrow. Joel.
Thanks, Rick. Good evening, President Fong, Superintendent Trinnell, members of the board. Thank you for having me. I'm going to pull up a little presentation here, share my screen. Okay, so as Rick said, we adopted our budget in June before July 1, and we used estimated actuals, and our team has between July 1 and today been closing the books, recording all revenues and expenditures for revenues earned and goods and services received between July 1, 2020 and June 30, 2021. And we've recorded those actuals to our general ledger. And here's the results of those actual revenues and actual expenditures and how they update our new beginning balance for 2021-22. And up until now, we've been using our estimated balance. So you'll see the changes in those. So we'll start with our revenues. As you can see, we get revenues from the state LCFF sources, as well as federal, other state and other local. So the net change in the revenues at the end of the year was about $14.3 million. And I can go over the details of those. These are the major material contributors. The major material contributor to the 14 million was we did book about $14.8 million in COVID stimulus revenues at the end of the year, or since the budget adoption. We out of those it's important to note that out of those 14.8 million in revenues, we booked 10 million in associated expenditures, and I'll go through those, and as well as 14.8 million of that went into the restricted reserve. So now I'll go into the expenditures. So you can see all the expenditures at the end of the year had a net delta of we came in about 1.1 million under estimated expenses. And like I said, there was an increase of about 10 million in COVID related expenses. It's important to note that about 4.8 million of that increased expenses was transfers from unrestricted sources into restricted sources. We had spent through the year money on busing that we obviously didn't provide busing, so that service was transferred to a substantially different use. We had to maintain that use was severely reduced, yet we had to maintain paying those salaries and maintaining those buses and cleaning them. And so we were able to, at the end of the year, close the year out with about a $1.6 million transfer in busing, or about a $2.4 million transfer in busing. And then we also, throughout the year, used custodial services that were also transferred to substantially different use. And we cleaned for COVID. We bought custodial materials and supplies. So that was about a $1.6 million transfer. So then we had an additional about $6.8 million new COVID recorded expenditures. And that was for, at the end of the year, we had a number of, we had our COVID bonus for the CSEA negotiations. We had the substitute payments. We had a number of different things that we were able to negotiate our bargaining units to do a hybrid teaching. And we also had the summer school. We were able to fully budget out and record the summer school that we just went over, all those expenses in the expanded learning opportunities grant. And so that was the 6.8 million in new recorded COVID expenditures. Now at the end of the year, we also had updated our budgeted items for operational costs. Gas, electric, we had some crossing guards, a number of items, that telephones, we didn't really know how we were going to end the school year, if we were going to come back, or how much of those operational needs, utilities were going to be used. And in the end of the year, we closed out with district-wide about $1.7 million in reduced expenditures versus the estimated. Special education, that was another fairly challenging budget year. We ended the year about 2.5 million lower than budgeted throughout the year. We struggled to fill some instructional aids and some good things that we didn't really have. We didn't know if we were going to physically come back in school, and so that's just how the numbers came out. Then in reduced books and supplies, about $500,000, and then we had locally restricted grants and donations. Now I think it's important to note that out of those three major categories that were material contributing to the closeout of the expenditures, the reduced expenditures for operational needs, the reduced expenditures for special education, and the reduced book supplies and capital outlay, the resulting effect of those reduction expenditures is an offset to the unrestricted ending fund balance, and so are the transfers. So when we transferred from unrestricted sources the busing costs and the custodial services, that would into restricted resources, that was also had an offset to the unrestricted reserve, meaning through those reduced expenses and those transfers, it increased the ending reserve. Now, the next one that affected the expenditures was we had about $1.8 million in reduced locally restricted grants and donations expenditures. So the schools, every school has their local resources for donations that they've had, and we go budget, and we work with them at the beginning of the year. We budget, and we really don't know what they're going to spend that on. Now, in the end of the year, it was about $1 million in unspent funds. So, but that result goes back. The offset result of that is it goes back to the restricted reserves. So then that money stays with those local restricted grants and donations. So that is the summary of the really material impacts to the expenditures. And now, after going over the revenues and expenditures, we really can see how the ending fund balance is updated to become the new beginning balances for this current year. So again, that we had a total delta of about 15 million. Now, we had the result was our actual net increase or decrease in fund balance. It was increased relative to estimates. And we can go now into the details, the components of the reserve. So you can see we anticipated having a ending balance of 18.7 million, and our actual ending balance was 34 million. Now, the components of those are, again, we increased the restricted reserve by the four plus million in COVID stimulus money, as well as we increased the reserve for that for those locally restricted grants and donations. Now, with the reduction in expenditures, we also saw a little reduction in the reserve for economic uncertainty, because that reserve for economic uncertainty is just 3% of your overall expenditures. So that leaves our unassigned, unappropriated, unrestricted reserve. So as you can see, again, we end up with about an increase to our projected ending reserve of about $8.8 million. And that is due to the changes in expenditures where we found savings in the items that I went over, as well as the transfer. So that was, roughly about 4 million, and then the transfer of about another 4 million plus from that, from the unrestricted into the restricted COVID for the busing and the custodial services. So yes, that is a very helpful for our current and future year when, with regards to our projected fiscal stabilization measures. These are one-time monies. If they were ongoing, that would impact that multi-year projection more, but this is how they end, the numbers ended out, and we've been tracking that. So the other thing is, we, in our budget, we adopted the $45 million COVID money in 2022-23. We put that in the budget to track that. While we closed out, we were targeting that to how we would fit that into our budget. So now that we've moved 14 million out of that, you'll see in the first interim next report that in that 22-23, now that amount will change to like 33 million. So that is the general fund, just our district schools. I'm going to move on to other funds now, and I just show the ending balance. So we've actually got a new fund for 2021. We had to, so for our current year financial report, we have to include all funds. But we also, the state now, the Government Accounting Standard Board is making us have a financial statement for our what's now called the Student Activity Special Reserve Fund. So that is our ASB. These are our local ASB accounts. All the accounts still are held locally in the schools' banking accounts, but we get that information from the schools and we transfer it into our books. And now we've got, so they're going to end the current year off with $830,000 reserve. Then we've got our charter schools funds. We projected 1.3. They're ending at about little less than one, or a little over 1 million. So they had some little less revenues, a little more expenditures, and the net result was a ending balance of about 1 million. Our Fund 12, which is our state preschool, our state preschool for families who qualified, that we mainly subcontract in North Bay Children's Center, ended up with pretty similar ending balance. Cafeteria Special Reserve Fund. So this is the equipment grant. So we were projecting a zero ending reserve in the cafeteria. This is our Cafeteria Fund 13. We got, we got some equipment grant money. And there's also, with the increased revenues and the state really stepping up, now we're closing that fund out with about $700,000. So that's good news. Deferred maintenance fund. We spent a little bit of money in there, but about a $5,000 swing. Special reserve fund. So this was just the actual amount that came out. I think we had probably a little bit too much interest booked there. Building 21, so we came out with about 13 million. This is relative to budget, so we just didn't do some projects that'll get pushed to next year, this current year. Capital Facilities Fund 25, we had some developer fees that came in. These are local builders that pay school impact fees. School Facilities Fund, that's our Fund 35. We are doing some activity in there. We're building the farmhouse, Alba Lane farmhouse. We're building a new, so there is some activity going on in that, but we've just got the same revenues that in the expenditures. And then our Special Reserve Fund 40. So we booked a little bit of Clean Energy Jobs Act, Prop 39. We're getting the Sizer Code work done. So we've got some revenue there. So we're going to continue to build that project. And then we also have some other things going on in Fund 40. We have RDA, the local. So we get property taxes from SCO, and they redistribution development agencies, and we've got more revenues than anticipated in that area as well. And these property taxes are earmarked, restricted to be for facilities. So we place this in Fund 40. And then our Fund 67 dental fund, again, less claims taken out, less payments in our dental fund, and we end the year about 233,000 north of where we projected. So a lot of information. Those are the material items that we went over that are really important. And so again, we're stepping into now, all this information. We finished our 45-day budget revision. There was some good news in that. Finished our unaudited actuals, positive ending condition, ending, we were able to find a better scenario than having less money, I suppose to say. And so we'll take those components. We will also update our budget forecasts for this year through October 31st, and we'll bring a new budget. And we'll also be working the Budget Advisory Committee, coming up with fiscal stabilization measures. And we're excited to bring the current year 21-22 first interim financial report to the board before December 15th. So the other thing, so these are called the unaudited actuals because we've done all our internal final recording of expenditures and revenues and all of our accounting, and now we call in. So they've been working with us the whole year, though. They analyze it throughout the year, but now they really dive into our numbers and with our independent audit firm, Siobhan and Associates, and that will bring the actual audited financial report by December 15th as well. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Executive Director Dantos. That was really thorough. I loved how you explained every fund to us because no one remembers. I know you know it backwards and forwards. Can we stop sharing the screen? And board members, hands up, questions? Director Flores.
Thank you, Director Dantos. Just one question. So according to the report, and by the way, thank you, it was very thorough. The unappropriated reserve fund went from, well, we're estimated it at $10.74 million, and we actually received 19.6, a difference of 8.8 million. You mentioned these were one-time sort of funding sources, right? Is that because of the ESSER funding? Could you just explain a little bit as to why they're one-time sources, one-time funding sources?
Yeah, great question. So when we budget, it's our roadmap at the beginning of the year. We say we're gonna spend this much money on, let's take the one category of utilities. So we're going to spend this amount of money in electricity. We do that because we take the prior 5 years data, we look at it, we look at increases to that from the utility companies, and we come up with a new budget and we budget that amount out. Now, and that we do that in every category. If at the end of the year, we budget, our actual expenses come out at that budget, then we see zero savings. But if we see savings, then that amount, will increase that savings. The offset to that savings will be an increase to that number, the unassigned, unappropriated amount for that 1 year. Now, the next year, we would re-budget that. We would say, well, what's happening? And we would rebudget that. If that so that's why it's one time. If the next year the same thing happens, our actual expenditures come in below budget, then it's another 1 year savings. Or we could decide, and I think this is a 1 year to savings because of COVID and things, like if it was a situation where it was in the multi-year projection, a normal year, we over budgeted it, we would say that we could probably count that as an ongoing savings, because we could update our multi-year projection to reduce that budget, meaning it's an ongoing savings. But for this current budget, we might do that at first interim. We might come back and say, I don't think so, because I think it was just more of a COVID year savings in those utilities. But so that is the answer that I have. Is that clear? Do I need to go into more detail? Like, for example, special education. We had an anomaly year, I would say, special education. I don't think we're going to go update our multi-year projection to reduce it 2.5 million. I mean, we're gonna rebudget it. And I think the budget, so we've already budgeted all our actual labor and expenditures, and so I don't think that's going to be an ongoing savings. And regarding the transfers, so those were one-time transfers. We're back. Those bus drivers now are back doing their regular busing. Custodials are doing their regular custodians. So that it's really kind of just one-time changes to the finances as we closed out the books for 2021.
But they don't include any of the one-time sources like ESSER funds or COVID funds that we received. So this is just money that you projected and that you came under. Okay.
Yeah. So the unrestricted, unassigned and appropriate amount for the unrestricted is just our basic services and our operational costs and our general administration.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, and I apologize. This should say unrestricted, unassigned, unappropriated amount.
Right.
That's probably what caused the confusion. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I'll just ask a question. I don't see Lori.
Sorry, Omar.
I just had a question just because I'm very curious on the unemployment insurance. Like the difference is like huge in terms of budgeted and versus actual. I think we budgeted like 1.3 million, but we spent like under 100,000. Just curious why such a huge difference in that.
So, okay, where are you looking at what are you looking at a specific slide or?
In the document with the budget, not the presentation, but the
Okay,
documents.
so
Under employee benefits.
Yeah, that's a great, well, so I think what you're looking at is, so that is, we went and did the 45-day budget revise. And I can say I actually have a little bit of notes on that. That will come out in our first interim report. So we have the unearned actuals and we have the 45-day budget revise. And in the 45-day budget revise, we got the relief. On July 16th, the governor signed the unemployment relief. And it took the percentage from, I think, 1.23 down to 0.5%. And that will be an update to our first interim and to our expenditures, but it's for this year and next year and the third year. So these numbers we're going over in the unearned actuals were for last year. But that's a great question, because when we come back with first interim, so we'll have this 8.8 million in increased, now unrestricted unassigned reserves. So we have to maintain our 3%. Now we're almost $9 million above that 3%. Then with that unemployment insurance relief, we're also going to save this year about 800,000. The following year, the same factor with the about 820 and then 840,000. So over the 3 years, we're going to save almost $2.5 million for that issue. And you'll see that in the first interim that's coming in, and you'll also see this savings or this ending result of this unhonored actuals in the first interim. And that's what that's when you'll see those items.
Thank you.
So that's just, about a little north of 11 million dollars on those items.
Other questions? I like this report, Joel. It's kind of good news in a way, right?
Yeah.
Let's open it to public comment.
Once again, if there are any students who are awake and would like to comment on this, please raise your hands. And now we will open it just to the general public. Please raise your hand if you'd like to comment on this item. There are no hands raised.
All right, board, if no other discussion, this is action item. Take a motion.
I'd like to move to approve the 2020-21 unaudited actuals.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Director McCormick, and I didn't know who the second was. Was who?
Me.
De La Cruz. Thank you.
Director Beard.
Aye.
Thank you. Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. Thank you so much, Executive Director.
Thank you.
Good job. And I want to just appreciate our student board member Georgia Beard for hanging in there with a computer that is not cooperating with her. So thank you for hanging in there.
Sorry, I came my camera on.
Okay. I'm going to ask for a time extension, just maybe half an hour, just in case.
I'll make the motion that we extend the meeting to 10:30.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're good. All right, 10:30. We're moving to consent items. We're going to do 2, 3, and 4, and 6. I'm pulling 5. We'll talk about it after. So 2, 3, 4, and 6. Do I have a motion for that?
I move for approval of F items 2, 3, 4, and 6.
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Director Sheffield and Director Manieri. Can we vote on that, please?
Director Beard.
He is left.
He left. Okay. Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. All right, I'd like to address item F5, which is contracts, and I'm going to ask Superintendent Trinnell to help me pull up the contract, the Humanidad contract.
Yes, thank you. Rick or Deputy Superintendent Edson, do you have that ready? And then we're also pulling over Principal
Bringing it up
Gage.
right now.
Thank you. And we're also pulling over Principal Gage as well as Mr. Mazzara.
So I know that we've worked with Humanidad as a provider for several years, and they've done a great job for us. They actually helped us with the mindfulness program at Cook School, which was well received, and the kids really spoke highly of it. So I'd like to ask Principal Gage a little bit more about, just quick, what this program does.
Good
She's
evening,
here.
everyone. Yes, I'm here. This is Carlina Gage. This program was in place last year at CCLA Cook. It was funded by CCLA 1 day a week and Cook 4 days a week through the district. It met with 80 middle school students. It provides one-to-one counseling. There's a boys circle, girls circle that was done last year, ongoing therapy. They met with about 6 students per day, and they provide a higher level of service than a counselor has to offer. And we would like 5 days a week. Last year, 4 days a week were provided through the district since it was Cook, and this year we're asking for 5 days a week as well. The same thing that we had last year, but this time it will all be funded through CCLA.
President Fong, could I also add, one of the strengths of the Humanidad program we began, and this is obviously predates Principal Gage, when we began our work with the SAY when they came in over 5 years ago, Dr. Maria Hess was out of Sonoma State, and she provided a program, a very culturally responsive program, and it was a much better fit for the population at Cook, and that's how we grew it. We've been with that program since then, as Ms. Gage described. Dr. Hess has sadly passed away this summer, but the program, the culturally responsiveness of that program was very unique and important and gave services and a level of engagement with the students and families that the SAY program never could. And so that's why they're kind of continuing it. And in the transition from Cook to CCLA, they want to make sure they really solidify the program and it continues and moves on.
Thank you for that context. I specifically want to look at number 4. I think it's on page 3, and it says expected outcomes and metrics, develop metrics. Can't quite see that. Can you blow that up a little bit? I'm wondering if our provider, Humanidad, provides any kind of data back to our district or to the school in terms of what they say they're going to do. So the metrics here, number 1 is to reduce suspensions and sanctions and increase attendance, increase self-regulation and their ability to express emotions. I'm wondering if the provider gives us some data back.
You know,
we can measure for LCAP.
Yeah, I can speak to SAY. They used to provide that. You know, I think one of the things as the board, you guys have discussed is we are kind of lacking in some of our quantitative metrics, some of the qualitative stuff and the process metrics we can talk about how many students were served, you know, the ultimate metric about improvement of grades, attendance, and behavior, you know, come through it. And you mentioned some of the success with the mindfulness program, you know, that they were doing was part of that. And there were metrics that we presented, I think certainly pre-COVID, about the effectiveness of that. And we talked about lowered suspension rates and those kind of pieces. So I certainly would agree that we need to do a better job of making those metrics available. I think it's important to define what they are and how we're going to measure them and all the important things around balancing quantitative and qualitative metrics for sure.
So that it's not all on SRCS staff, we should also put this load on our provider. Yeah. If they're providing this and this is what they're saying they're going to do, I would like to see them give us data. How do we know? And so this is not just Humanidad. These are our contracts. These are everything that we're doing for our LCAP. How do we know that what we're saying that we're doing in our LCAP is actually working? How do we know that? And that's what the board gets to do. That is our job. And so that's what we're going to want to keep seeing. And thank you for getting that point.
Yeah, thank you. And Principal Gage will work with our team because we've had some of those metrics before with Humanidad. And so we'll just make sure that transition to the full CCLA site and Principal Gage happens pretty well. And
Principal Gage, thank you this is your new principal, and I don't mean to call you forth, but I know you, and I know that you're really on top of these things. And really, this is an example. I like this program because I have spoken to some kids at Cook who've talked about this. So it's anecdotal data, But this is going to be true for all of our LCAP programs, how we're spending our money and how we know it's working, right? Because if we don't know it's working anymore, right, how do we know? So that's just where I want to go. Board, any other?
Yeah, just a quick comment. And this is, you know, an opportunity to kind of work across jurisdictions here. We at the county are doing something very similar where we're working with each of our contractors and all of our safety net departments to actually develop a common set of metrics. And so I think that that's also something that's really critical, is not having different metrics for different contractors, but figuring out how they all kind of fit into a common set of data that we can look at across programs to look at those questions around, you know, efficiency and reach and where programs land and how they work. And, you know, if we're being equity focused, we're really developing, it's a co-design process with our contractors and with our kids, right? To figure out how they measure a program being effective. And what would those metrics look like? So some you know, program like that would be co-designing measurements for effectiveness would be super cool as an educational experience. And if there's any more support that I can provide in terms of what's happening at the county for a very similar effort around kind of performance metrics with a very clear focus on equity, I'd love to help.
That's a very key concept. Thank you so much. Other board, we can stop sharing this. Thank you so much, Principal Gage, for being here. Any other comments? All right, this is a consent item for action for approval.
I move to approve F5, approval of contracts.
Second.
Okay, so that was motioned by Director Manieri and seconded by Director Sheffield.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye, thank you. Thank you for listening to that discussion. We're moving to the approval of the minutes and the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting held on August 25th. And we need to make a change on that minutes. And it has to do with F1, I believe. So we need to approve the absent board member of Omar Medina.
I'd like to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting on August 25th with the recommended adjustment.
Second.
Can we have that vote, please?
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Flores.
Aye.
Director Medina. President Fong.
Aye, thank you. Are there any board member requests for information? There are some information items for you to take a look at, including, future board items. All right, Superintendent Trunnell, anything else you'd like to say for the good of the order tonight?
Thank you so much to the board and to our community who's still with us for being diligent and for asking the questions that help to make us better and stronger for our students and our families and our staff.
And I'd like to point out it is 9:59 and good night, everyone.
Extend
We
it.
are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.